Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. We are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. Titans OTAs today. Cam Ward getting the first team reps today, as opposed to Brandon Allen, who got the first team reps first last time. Meanwhile, when it comes to the second reps, it was Will Levis who got the second reps reportedly today out at training camp. Or I say training camp. I don't know why I said that. It's definitely not training camp, but at OTAs. So the Titans will have one more OTA. I believe that's tomorrow. And then next week, they'll have the 3-day mandatory mini camp. And then it is time for the off season and the summer vacation. And then it's time to get back to work. So I want to start on this story because today Brian Callahan met with the media and talked about some of the changes that they made in the coaching staff and talked about how Cam Ward looks. And again, because last week was kind of more of a big picture thing, this was kind of more individual topics. But Pro Football Focus put Brian Callahan on the hot seat. They had a list of coaches on the hot seat entering this season, and yes, Brian Callahan was on the list. And let's all be honest for a second. Brian Callahan probably should be on the hot seat after that disastrous season that they had last year. But here's what Pro Football Focus wrote, quote, although first-year head coaches Gerard Mayo and Antonio Pierce were let go after their first full seasons, Callahan survived the cut. But more is necessary to avoid a similar fate to his counterparts. Under Callahan's guidance, Tennessee ended a woeful 3-14 in 2024. Callahan's offensive success with the Bengals hardly translated, as the Titans ended the year 29th in EPA per play, 25th in success rate, and 27th in average yards per play. Basically, PFF says, yeah, they sucked. And not only did they sucked on offense. PFF continues. Callahan now has his hand-picked quarterback of the future and number 1 overall selection, Cam Ward, in addition to an upgraded roster featuring Kevin Zeitler and Dan Moore Jr. Although this team is still among the league's worst in terms of talent and years away from contending, Callahan will need to get the wheels moving in the right direction, particularly on offense, or he risks being fired after his second campaign. So again, big picture, they say Callahan was abysmal last year. But unlike Gerard Mayo, unlike Antonio Pierce, somehow, some way he survived. Now, he's got Cam Ward, and they added Kevin Zeitler, and they added Dan Moore, so they should be a little bit better. But the roster, as they say, is still years away from contending. But now Callahan's got to get the wheels moving in the right direction. And I'm trying to think, well, how can you be years away from contending? How can you have a roster, again, that is years away from contending, but still get the operation moving in the right direction? Because I talk about this all the time. People, when it comes to Callahan, they want to talk about wins and losses, and they want to say, well, if he wins 7 games, but I see progress with Cam Ward, then I think, and I'm like, guys, that's not how the human brain works as far as the NFL is concerned. Caleb Williams threw for 3,500 yards last season, 20-plus touchdowns, 9 interceptions. And the coach was holding him back, remember? The part about Callahan being on the hot seat, well, that part we already knew. But again, I still can't get over the years away from competing. Because there's no way, if this roster is actually years away from competing, there's no way Brian Callahan is going to keep his job. That's just not how this league works. This is what Brian Callahan has to be doing in order to survive the 2025 season. And this is very important because this is probably the only place you're going to hear this. And again, people make it way too complicated than it has to be. Brian Callahan has to be coaching a competitive team by the end of the season, or else he will be fired. And if you think any other outcome is possible, I am already rolling my eyes at you. There are going to be people out there that say, well, you absolutely, no matter what, Jared, you cannot fire Brian Callahan because that will set back Cam Ward's development to bring in a new coach. And I hear that and I understand that. But again, that's not how this league or this organization operates when it comes to coaching patience. The NFL as a whole and the Titans individually have absolutely no patience. And both the NFL ecosystem, I should say, and the Titans themselves get caught up in playing what I call musical blame, which is this year it's your fault, next year it's his fault. Again, last year the quarterback and the general manager got the boot, and the head coach kept his job. The year before that, it was the head coach who got the boot. The year before that, it was the GM who got the boot. So it's a moving target consistently. And again, I think that you know how I feel about Callahan. Good man, unsure if he's a good coach, worried he can't hold people accountable. And I could tell you that it would be different if I owned the football team than it is now where I'm watching from afar, because if I owned the football team, I could evaluate what goes on in the building. Like, is he the right guy? I'm sure the Titans will tell me, oh, no, you don't see it, but Callahan holds people accountable every day. Well, you're right, but I can't see it because I'm not invited into the building outside of for the media stuff. But like in the building, I don't see that. So there's no way for me to know. So I'm only going off of what I do see. And if I owned the team, it would be a little different because, again, I could evaluate if he's the right guy to hold others accountable or inside the building, the things that us plebeians cannot see. That said, the person who makes the decision on Brian Callahan's fate, it's not me. It's not you. It's not Chad Brinker. It's not Mike Borgonzi. Don't get it twisted. It's Amy Adams Strunk. The owner decides on the coach. Now, the owner can be pushed in a direction one way or another, but across all 32 teams, with the exception of the Green Bay Packers that don't have an owner and their president, Mark Murphy, he decides on the coach. So it is Amy who's making that call about Callahan, and she's not very often seen in that building. And so given the way the league works, when it comes to Callahan in the hot seat, I mean, it only comes down to one thing. Is Brian Callahan coaching a competitive team in November and December of 2025? I'm not saying 8 wins means competitive, 7 wins, 6 wins. I'm saying, are they winning enough while being competitive down the stretch? And that may sound like a completely subjective term, using the word competitive. But that's because this decision is going to be a subjective decision. But this idea that PFF says the Titans roster is years away from competing, but Callahan has got to get this thing pointed in the right direction. Again, to me, that doesn't make a lot of sense. To me, that's an oxymoron. Because if the roster is years away from competing, then Brian Callahan is getting fired, because that means they won't be competing in 2025. And if they aren't competitive and he is fired, the narrative will not be, well, this roster was god-awful and he did the best he could, or nobody else could do better. The narrative will be, well, we need a coach for Cam Ward that can maximize his potential, and Callahan's not that guy. But it doesn't come down to anything that, again, especially with an owner who's not in the building, it doesn't come down to, well, if this metric says that Callahan's doing a good job, then he's doing a good job. If we're committed to Cam Ward's development, then no matter what, Brian Callahan will stay the head coach. If Cam Ward throws for 200 yards a game and has a QBR north of 48, then that means no, that's not it. Either they'll be competitive in November and December, or he'll be fired. It's as simple as that. And again, it doesn't mean 7 wins, 8 wins, 9 wins. It just means competitive. It means that they probably have to win somewhere around 7 games. And in the games they lose, they can't get blown out 41-7. They're going to have to lose those games 28-26. It's going to have to kind of look like the Denver Broncos last year, which, again, this time last year, everybody thought Denver sucked. And they ended up making the playoffs. Why? They have a good coach. Now, they spend more money than you do. But, again, I'm just telling you what it is. And everything else is all gobbledygook. And everything else about this, well, the roster is years away from competing, and this is a rebuild, and it doesn't matter. It does not matter in this league. If they lose games on Sunday in the fall, then fans will think that Callahan is holding back Cam Ward. And it doesn't matter how many touchdowns Ward throws for or how many yards or anything else. It all comes down to the end result. Did he or did he not win the game? Look at the stats between Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams. They're not that much different. Now, what is the feeling between the two? You know the answer. So if this roster is years away from competing, that means Brian Callahan is months away from being unemployed. 615-737-1025 is the phone number if you want to weigh in. That is 615-737-1025. And there's something that I heard today. Again, it was very small, that Callahan is doing with the OTAs today. And it's not the end of the world that he's doing it, that that. But it's the kind of thing that I hope he understands. Like, dude, you're on the clock. You are really, really on the clock. And we'll get to that coming up next. 615-737-1025, Stillman and Company, rocking and rolling. 1025, 106 for the game. There you go. That was Brian Callahan today. So Kevin Zeitler is in town. Kevin Zeitler is in meetings, but you're not going to see Kevin Zeitler out on the OTA practice field because at 35 years old, he doesn't need the practice. And again, this isn't a big deal to me that Zeitler's not practicing. I'm not banging the table. This isn't something, like L'Jarius Sneed, related that drives me crazy. This isn't like last year when they said there was going to be competition at right tackle and PT wasn't on the field. Zeitler's the starting right guard. He's going to be the starting right guard, and I think Zeitler's going to be fine. But there's one thing that does bother me about this a little bit, which is in football, your practices, especially in the offseason, are somewhat limited, and the Titans' offensive line is a work in progress, and it's going to have a bunch of new pieces to it. Again, the left tackle has never played with the left guard. The center is hurt. The right guard has never played with the right tackle. And the right tackle has never played right tackle in the National Football League. So, to me, I look at all these practices and I think to myself, if you want to get the communication right, if you want to be, as Paul Kaharski is demanding, ready to go week 1, then you probably need as much work as possible. And I know it's June, but Brian Callahan's got to realize something because he is on the hot seat. Again, the president of the team said to TD after they fired Rand Carthon, anointed Chad Brinker the czar of football, Burke Nihill, the CEO of the team, said to TD that they were going to hold Callahan accountable. If that doesn't scream to you on the hot seat, then you do not get the NFL. So Brian Callahan needs to realize he doesn't have as much time as he thinks he has. In fact, I looked at the schedule today. He's got one more OTA session and then 3 days of mandatory mini camp next week, and that's it. 4 days on the practice field, and that's it. Everybody have a great summer, and we will see you at the end of July. And I believe the Titans have decided against holding another session of OTAs after the minicamp so that everyone can get a better summer vacation. But again, that's their choice, not mine. So Callahan's got 4 more practices. Then training camp hits, where they'll have 1 week of practices, basically, and then it's time for joint practices and preseason games. Then it's Denver week 1. So I don't know if he has noticed how ownership operates around here, but I do. And patience is not one of their strong suits. So while it does feel like the football season is 100 million days away, it's actually less than 100 days away. And the truth is, he's got about 10 more practices until it really starts to get intense, where you need guys in shape, you need guys knowing what they're doing, and you need to be making your football team better and not just trying to figure out who should play where. This isn't baseball, where you can suck for the first 2 months of the season and then figure it out. This isn't the NHL, where you have training camp for 1 week, play a couple of preseason games, and on you go. And hey, we'll play hard at the beginning of the year, and then we'll take a little smoke break here, and then a Christmas will come, and then around the first of the year, teams will have separated themselves, and then we'll go hard before the trade deadline, and then we'll go hard up to the playoffs, and then we'll actually start playing hard to play. That's not how the NFL works. So when it comes to Brian Callahan, and again, I'm using the Zeitler decision as, hey, we don't need him out there on the practice field. He knows how to play in the NFL. I don't disagree with that. He knows how to play in the NFL, and 1 OTA practice missed in June, although he did miss OTAs last week too, and I guess he was in the building. That's not going to determine whether or not Kevin Zeitler can play football. But if you really want to have a competitive team this season, you do need the offensive line to gel as quickly as possible. How does the offensive line gel? By doing. How do they do it? They go out and practice. Now, I will admit again that I don't think the offensive line from a physical standpoint can really do anything until they put the pads on. All the coaches will tell you, well, we can work on technique and we can work on fundamentals and we can work on, but again, offensive line is taking your pads and getting up there and banging into the guy in front of you. So You don't really get better until you put the pads on. But at the same time, communication, that you can work on. And I know Zeitler is ready to go or will be ready to go when it comes time for Denver, or at least you assume that he'll be ready to go when it comes time for Denver. But at the same time, is J.C. Latham, who's never played right tackle in the NFL and has never played next to Kevin Zeitler, is he going to be ready? Again, I think you need as much practice time as you can get. And again, that's without getting into the minutia of, did the Titans really give up 3 practices, OTAs with a rookie quarterback, by just saying after mandatory minicamp's over, all right, everybody enjoy the summer? And I would say that's probably not a good idea either. 615-737-1025, and our phone line is driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Ben says, win 7 games this year, and if Cam shows promise, that would be enough in most places. And if the Titans fire Callahan, then that's just par for the course. When you are years away from contention, you have to take big positive steps. Otherwise, you won't be a contender for a decade. I agree that he is the hottest, that he is on the hot seat overall because they aren't going to win 7 games, and Cam won't look like Jaden Daniels. Here's what I'll say about why you can't be years away as far as the roster is concerned. Again, that was the line that Pro Football Focus used when talking about the talent on the Titans roster. They said years away. In fact, the quote, I want to make sure I get this right. Callahan now has his handpicked quarterback of the future and number 1 overall draft selection, Cam Ward, in addition to an upgraded roster featuring Kevin Zeitler and Dan Moore Jr. Although this team is still among the league's worst in terms of talent and years away from contending, Callahan will need to get the wheels moving in the right direction. Okay, here's why this matters. The idea of, okay, if you're years away from contending. The Titans have a bunch of holes as is right now. Do you know how many extra meaningful draft choices the Titans have next year? 0. They don't have an extra 2nd-round pick next year. They don't have an extra 3rd-round pick next year. And they certainly don't have an extra 1st-round pick next year. That's part of the reason why people like me were banging the drum and yelling and screaming about making the trade with the Giants in order to get the extra picks for the future, to fill some of those holes for the long term. After this season, and this is off the top of my head, I have not even thought this through, completely. Like, I haven't gone and researched it and anything else, and I could probably do that. But after this year, and again, I think we can all agree the Titans have holes on their football team. Holes at receiver, although they did draft some receivers, and they signed Tyler Lockett. A hole at tight end. I don't think Chig is an NFL tight end. Hole at pass rusher, for sure. Arden Key, he kind of sucks. Femi Oladejo has 4.5 career sacks. A hole at inside backer. And again, Snead, hole at corner. After this season is over, Chigakonkwo is a tight end, is a free agent. So, see ya. So now that's another hole. Tyler Lockett's a free agent. That's another hole. L'Jarius Sneed is going to be cut. That's another hole. Roger McCreary, free agent. That's another hole. Xavier Woods, free agent. That's another hole. So you see what I'm saying? Like Kevin Zeitler, hole. Like I'm trying to tell you, like, that's the problem here is that, okay, if you're years away from competing, if your roster is years away from competing, you'll have to do even more work next year on the roster, because unless Cam Ward becomes Josh Allen tomorrow, where you can just let all your receivers go every year and be totally fine, which you and I both know that's just not going to happen this year. And it would be unfair to put that on Cam. So when you're talking to me about, well, your roster's years away from competing, and, well, with Callahan, the roster's in such bad shape, there's no way he can do this. Well, then he's going to be fired, and you're going to be in the same spot next year, albeit with what you think is your quarterback, but you won't really know. Again, when it comes to people just saying things in the offseason or wanting to feel better about it or whatever, I mean, I'm just looking at this, from a way the league and especially the Titans usually operate. If this roster really is years away from competing, then they're going to be bad and they're going to fire the coach. And that's the end of the story. And I'm not sure that that's the right thing to do, but I just also know how the league works, and I just don't think that there's probably an alternative there. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. We'll hit some of your phones. Plus, the one name that does seem to be popping up as far as the receiver position is concerned. And I actually think this is a good thing. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. There you go. That was Brian Callahan. And again, that's something that's going to need to get figured out pretty quickly. I know, again, it feels like when it comes to the Titans, you keep hearing like, oh, there's plenty of time. There's plenty of time. I mean, I don't want to hurt the feelings of the kids who just started summer vacation, but soon enough, it'll be time to go back to school. And I know that it feels like that's way, 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 way away, but it'll be here sooner than you think, especially considering that the Titans have, I believe, 4 more practices, an OTA tomorrow that is not open to the press, an OTA tomorrow, and then 3 days of mandatory minicamp, and then it's goodbye for 6 weeks. The summer is 12 weeks, right? 3 months of 4 weeks, and they're going to take 6 of them off, and they'll get back at the end of July. So they really don't have a lot of practices to go, and then you start figuring things out. The one name that I keep seeing pop up, whether it's a tweet from TD or a tweet from somebody else covering the team, or even the little videos that the team puts out on social media, is Chimere Dike, the 4th-round receiver drafted out of Florida. Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you when it comes to Chimere Dike. I didn't know anything about him until the second he was drafted. I had never heard of him when the Titans made him the first pick of day 3. You know, it's kind of crazy because usually there are a couple of guys that are not taken, you know, in the first 3 rounds of the draft that a lot of people thought might be like a fringe first rounder or penciled in around the 50th pick. And my God, we have day 3 tomorrow and they're still sitting there available. And every time I'm like, man, there seem to be some pretty good players. I remember Keely Ringo, the corner out of Georgia, was on the board going into day 3 a couple years ago. And it was like, how? This year was a little different because all of the chatter going into day 3 was revolving around Shedeur Sanders. So it wasn't as if there were like all these guys saying, oh, well, this guy would be a good fit with the first pick of the 4th round, and this guy would be a good pick with the 4th round, and this guy would be a good pick, and this guy would be a... No. Those don't exist. Because, again, all of the talk was on Shedeur Sanders. But I didn't hear anybody talking about Chimere Dike. So the Titans draft Dike, and I don't know anything about him. I go to Dane Brugler's The Beast, which is his draft guide that if you're a subscriber to The Athletic, you get. That's the one that I use because, A, I don't have to pay for it. I'm already a subscriber to The Athletic, which, by the way, with my new credit card, I now get paid for or I get credited on my statement. Yes, for basically free. But I get it for free, and it's a very organized in terms of the information. So I pull up the Chimere Dike file, and I see the fact that he ran a 4.3, and I'm like, okay, guy's got speed. That's what they need, speed. I read the strengths, I read the weaknesses, and then I read the summary. As soon as the Titans draft a player, everybody on Twitter becomes an expert on some guy, again, after the 2nd round, because we don't ever talk about what's going to happen in the 5th round leading up to the draft. Everybody becomes an expert on guys they didn't really know anything about before that. And when it came to DK, there were a lot of Titan fans that did not like that pick. Well, they could have drafted this receiver instead, or they could have had that guy, and they took this guy. And then the Titans took Elic Iomanor out of Stanford. And a lot of Titan fans were very excited about that because in the mock drafts, in the lead up, there was a lot of chatter that he was a top 100 player. And more importantly, that he might even sneak into the 2nd round out of Stanford. And he had the one game in college where he went absolutely bonkers against Travis Hunter. So it's like, oh, yeah, great pick. But the thing I'll say is the guy that I'm rooting for to be the best player is Chimere Dike. The Titans signed Xavier Restrepo as an undrafted free agent. Titans Twitter went crazy saying this guy was going to be the next Drew Pearson, undrafted to the Hall of Fame. You'll see. You'll see. He and Cam at Miami were electric. You know, Chris Sanders comes on the show, and you know I love Chris with all my heart. Chris comes on the show, and Chris is like, well, Cam Ward says that he is the best route runner in the draft, or the most underrated receiver in the draft. And I'm like, Cam Ward didn't study the draft. Cam Ward worried about getting drafted. He wasn't worried about the draft board. He didn't have the board in front of him evaluating all the players. not a general manager or a director of scouting or anything like that. So once you get over the Disney Plus storyline of Cam Ward and Xavier Restrepo, best friends forever, once you get over that, and the fact that Io Manor was considered going into the draft, a name that we knew, whereas DK, again, I had never heard of him. And I had been playing around with the PFF mock drafts too. Once you get over that, it actually, isn't really that bad that Chimere DK seems to be the guy whose name I keep seeing, keep popping up in tweets. I keep seeing in the videos. Oh, here, it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. Here's the completion to DK. Because you want your general manager to be able to scout the right guys. And if everybody going into the draft said that Io Manor was better than DK, but the Titans took DK over Io Manor, then it's obvious that they think that DK is better than Io Manor. So when it comes to making those selections, the guy I want to be good is DK because that's the guy that this staff believes in the most. And if he is the guy who is good out of this group, then it would say, hey, they really might know receiver because they probably circled a guy that they thought, okay, we can take him in round 4. And if he's there in round 4, we'll take him. They had a whole night to scout it out because the 3rd round ended and they were first on the clock. And this was the guy they took. So I know that he didn't have the pre-draft hype that Io Manor had. And I know he didn't play college football with Cam Ward, so it doesn't make for as good of a story. But this guy is fast. And I know he's fast because he ran the 40. And he ran the 40 fast. Xavier Restrepo ran the 40, and he ran it slow. So I know Chimere DK is fast. And this team needs speed. So that's the guy that I'm keeping my eye open. I'm like, hey, man, if DK can become a player here, like as a 4th round pick, that is a great addition if it ends up working. So this is the one that I see the highlights and I keep seeing DK's name. And I'm like, I want to see his name. Gator Tim says, I've watched Chimere DK the last 3 years. He is always open, catches everything, and nobody catches him from behind. Well, he can't be that good or else he wouldn't have gone. He would have gone in like the first 8 picks. If he's always open, catches everything, and no one can outrun him, then he's Randy Moss. And again, I don't remember. I didn't read anything about DK off the field. Certainly not the level of Randy Moss. You know, it's funny. People talk about the Titans' decision to pass on Randy Moss and draft Kevin Dyson as if 20 other teams didn't pass on Randy Moss for the exact same reasons that the Titans passed on Randy Moss. In fact, the 1998 draft is on YouTube. You can watch it. I did like a week and a half, 2 weeks before the draft. And it was hilarious because the entire ESPN TV show, the way this year's draft, the TV show was Shedeur Sanders this, Shedeur Sanders that, it was about Randy Moss. And there were coaches. Dick Vermeil said he will not be on our draft board. Tony Dungy said you have to err on the side of caution. Dallas, I believe, picked 8th in that draft, or I forget exactly where Dallas picked. They were on the clock, and the ESPN crew said, this is going to be the team that's going to take Randy Moss. And they passed on Randy Moss because of the off-the-field stuff. Titans are the ones that get the shafts because they took Kevin Dyson. But, I mean, again, this was like well-documented, the issues with Randy Moss. So if DK's that good and he lasts until the 4th round, it might be because of some other reason, and I don't see that either. So I'm doubting that Chimere DK is that good. Like Gator Tim saying, I've watched him the last 3 years, and he's always open, he catches everything, and nobody catches him from behind. Although he did say that he had crap quarterbacks at Florida and a crap coach, and I will tell you this. I think Billy Napier at Florida sucks. I think he's a minor league coach, and I see this all the time. I think he is a minor league coach who got called up to the major leagues. And I see this all the time. Scott Satterfield, who's the coach at Cincinnati, he got hired at Louisville. He did a good job at Appalachian State. He got hired at Louisville and became our head coach. And I just remember the way he would do things and the way he would deal with the media and the way he got caught sniffing at the South Carolina job. And it's like, dude, this ain't the minor leagues, man. It's the major leagues. It's different. And I feel the same way about Billy Napier. So Gator Tim may be onto something, when it comes to Chimere Dike saying, hey, man, he had terrible quarterbacks and a terrible coach. And if that's the case, I can agree with that because I think that Billy Napier at Florida is a terrible, and I mean terrible coach. Again, I'm not saying like he can't coach ball and doesn't deserve a whistle, but I'm saying like I think he's probably a minor league coach. 615-737-1025. More of your phones. We will hit those. 615-737-1025. Plus, Brian Callahan provides an update about who was there today and who was not there today. And I actually have to give Brian Callahan a little credit for something. We'll do that next. I'm going to Company 1025, 106 for the game. Stillman and Company. So let's get to some phones here in a second. First, I do want to say that apparently today Brian Callahan met with the media, and he was talking about how I guess some guy I had never heard of was sick, and that's the only guy that was out today compared to last week, which means that once again, everybody except for Jeffrey Simmons. In fact, do we have that read where Brian Callahan was talking today about his opening statement about just kind of, and I was a little surprised that Callahan did this because most coaches, in OTAs, especially Vrabel, they're like, oh, well, you'll see. And again, we know that some guys are rehabbing like L'Jarius Sneed. And so the only guy that was absent, PK reported last week, was Jeffrey Simmons. And it sounds like from Callahan's opening statement today, the only guy that was absent again was Simmons. Here's what Callahan said.
Don't have much of an opening statement for you today. The only player that for sure is going to be absent for illness reasons is Curtis Jacobs. He's sick today. Everything else is pretty much status quo. Nothing much changed from last week. So we'll keep pressing forward.
Okay. So again, I said I'd never heard of Curtis Jacobs. I actually do remember last week, Curtis Jacobs was the one that batted down a Cam Ward pass, and I looked him up, and he apparently was a second-year linebacker, I think out of Ole Miss. I could be wrong. Whatever. Who cares? If Brian Callahan says, hey, this offseason, we're really going to highlight teamwork and fundamentals and leadership building and everything else, and I need everybody to buy in, while the story is that Jeffrey Simmons is the one person not buying in because he's the one person not here, and that's a Simmons issue. As far as the team itself is concerned, I do think that's probably a pretty good sign for Brian Callahan. So if Simmons wants to be, the one guy that poops in the punch bowl, then the story I think there should probably be more about Simmons than it should be about Callahan and his offseason system, which again, I think is still a little hokey pokey, but I can roll with it. Let's go to Michael. Phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. Michael, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
Hey, Jared. Thanks for taking my call. So this is kind of a two-parter for you. Who do you think out of our draft class this year, one, has the best chance of succeeding in the league, like possible Pro Bowl level? And
Cam Ward.
Piggybacking off of that, okay, that is the easy answer. Who do you think outside of Cam Ward would be
the
best hit we could possibly have? So, if you were to choose one guy besides Cam Ward to make the Pro Bowl out of this draft class, who would it be?
Yeah, I think that's really a tough question for me to answer, and I'm trying to be as fair as possible here. Michael, thank you. I'm trying to be as fair as possible with this because I don't want to sound like a coach that's trying to dodge a question from the media by saying, I don't really know a lot about these guys. I know what everybody else knows about these guys. As far as knowing anything more, I just don't. Again, there have been 2 open OTAs, and I went to one of them. So what can I tell you about Kevin Winston, who hasn't been out there because he's torn his ACL? That makes it a little difficult for me as far as, okay, who could be a Pro Bowler? Who could be an impact player? The truth is the Titans, and I don't know what their board looked like. And this is really important because, this came up last year when they did the opposite when it came to Tavondre Sweat, though the offer that the Rams ended up making to Carolina, 1 pick behind you, was just so good that if the Titans got offered that same offer, and I have seen evidence that tells me they did not, so I'm not going to get on them, even though I did when didn't have the evidence. I will say that Femi Oladejo has to play like the 38th pick in the draft or the 35th pick in the draft or whatever it was that they traded. In order for that trade to work, because I really did like Donovan Ezaraku out of Boston College, who went a couple picks after the 34th pick. I really, really liked Nick Emanwari, who went with that 34th pick to Seattle. But the Titans wanted to go a 2-for-1 route, and so they drop back and they take Oladejo. You need Oladejo to play like the 34th pick in the draft. Now, he's got the body that says, hey, I can be a superstar in this league. And so did Derrick Henry, and he went in the second round. But so did Chris Henry, who also went in the second round. So, again, it's a cop-out because I just don't know these players that well. DK can run, which I like. I'd probably have to go Helm. Because I do buy into the fact that Helm was hurt and went through the drills. And I know that that's something that when you don't run well, you make an excuse. And then it sounds like it's a good thing that you did that. But I saw the picture. I forget which reporter tweeted it after Helm got drafted. I mean, his ankle was black. And he fought through, the combine and played through it. So he's tough. He played at Texas and was a productive player at Texas. That is a big school that plays real teams. That matters. Cam Ward needs a tight end that he can rely on. Wiley gets hurt too much. Chig sucks. Chig's a free agent at the end of the year. Helm is big when you see him in person. I'll go Helm if that makes you feel any better. But they need it to be, they really do need it to be Oladejo because he rushes the passer and, they get after it. By the way, Matthew in Nashville says, speaking of Florida, because I was complaining about Billy Napier earlier, he said, if you haven't talked about it yet, I would love to hear your thoughts on the inappropriate behavior by Florida's baseball coach towards Coastal Carolina, East Carolina, and the NCAA officials, cursing them out, mad about the NCAA changing game times. So I actually do have that on the grid. And I am not someone that says, hey, listener, be listening for that at this time, because again, your schedule is your schedule and you listen to the show whenever you can listen to the show. And I don't take that for granted, but we will be discussing that in the next hour as we'll hit on baseball and UT making it to a super regional for the 5th straight year. One texter says, I've never been an NFL coach, but the Kevin Zeitler answer is my problem with the entire Titans organization. They are pros excuse is fine when you aren't the worst team in the league, but they use it too many times without having the value to back it up. And again, this is Kevin Zeitler being 35 years old, not practicing today, and Brian Callahan saying he'll be fine. I kind of agree. Again, when Derrick Henry was winning rushing titles and would almost never practice, they'd have Derrick Henry over off to the side in the sand pit. It wasn't like any of us were sitting there saying, will Derrick be ready? Does Derrick need the reps? It was like, okay, we know Derrick Henry's the rushing champion. He does it here. Kevin Zeitler's never played a snap for the Titans. Are you sure? Boys will be boys. They will be pros. Dustin in Hopkinsville is mad about Jeffrey Simmons. Says, with all due respect, and I do mean every ounce of respect deserved, I'll say screw. He said screw Simmons. We'll get into the Simmons element of this. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number. But Tennessee has made it to the Super Regionals, and their fans are getting cocky again. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 1025-1063. The Game. Speaking of baseball, be sure to tune in for Sounds Baseball on 94.9 The Fan. 94.9 The Fan tonight as the Sounds take on Gwinnett at First Horizon Park. Pre-game at 6:20. First pitch at 6:35. Coverage available on the Game Nashville app and at theGameNashville.com. Sounds Baseball on 94.9 The Fan, presented by Twin Peaks and Family Leisure. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game National Studios, presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. David Reed, congratulations to your Tennessee Volunteers, baby. Back in the Super Regional, and the Vol fans have their mojo back, though you say you're a Vol fan who doesn't care about baseball.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time reconciling the success that they're having, and just this team is not likable. Tony Vitello is no longer likable to me, and the antics of these team and these players, I just can't. I hate that they're wearing the colors that I cheer for. That's where I'm at with it.
Reed, you are the only Tennessee fan that I know that thinks anything like this. You're the only Tennessee fan I know that says, oh, I don't really care about baseball. And you're the only Tennessee fan I know that's like, I can't do Vitello and these guys. They're too much for me.
Yeah. If anyone over the age of 25 can stand up and celebrate these guys for the way they play the game. Like, there's one thing to play with passion. There's another thing to be disrespectful to other teams, to other fans, to other coaches. And that's what I see this team doing just about every time they take the field. And I don't want to be a part of it.
Do you really feel like this team's disrespectful? I mean, I didn't feel like they were that disrespectful last night against Wake Forest.
Not against, but there's been times this season where, yes, the kid that got ejected was very disrespectful. I don't know if he was directing it at the catcher, the other team, or the umpire, but that was about as disrespectful as you could get.
I kind of like David Reed's Vols take, because David Reed is the opposite of 99.9% of Vol Twitter that is just up in arms celebrating another berth in the Super Regional. And let me just say this. Congratulations to Tony Vitello and congratulations to UT, because they have made the Super Regional 5 years in a row. And boy, all those Vol fans that were real quiet after Vanderbilt beat them 10-0, after Vanderbilt took 2 out of 3 at Lindsey Nelson Stadium, when Vanderbilt got the number 1 seed, they were loud last night saying Vanderbilt is still their little brother. And let me just say this, as Lee Corso would say, not so fast, my friend. And I'm going to tell you why. Now, it has nothing to do with what David Reed doesn't like about this UT team, although, again, I am amazed at David Reed's UT take. We're going to have to talk to Chad about this, by the way, when Chad comes on the show, about David Reed's anti-UT take as a UT baseball take as a UT fan.
I'll be highly disappointed in Chad Wither, who's now a coach himself, if he endorses the antics of this team.
I promise you, he will love it, and he would kiss the ground Tony Vitello walks on.
It's going to disappoint me.
I'm just prepare yourself for it.
Okay.
It's going to happen.
All right.
But here's why. To every Tennessee fan last night that was tweeting me, I love the ones that are like, your team didn't even get out of the regional. Ha, ha, ha. And I'm like, my team won that regional. I am not a Vanderbilt fan. I am an umpire. If I see the ball cross the plate, I call it a strike. When Tim Corbin was kicking that ass, I called it what it was. When Tim Corbin choked, I called it what it was. My team is not Vanderbilt. And because I come from a program that's a very proud baseball program, I think I am an unbiased expert on this. Tennessee has not passed Vanderbilt yet for the top spot in the state after the 3 out of 4 this year and the 10-0 butt kicking in the SEC, because the super regionals are great and all that, but premier programs, and both Vanderbilt and Tennessee at this point in time are premier college baseball programs. The super regional is not that big of a deal. Omaha is a big deal. National titles are a big deal. And I give Tennessee a lot of credit, unlike David Reed apparently, because last night the bats showed up. Wake Forest is no joke now. And the ACC has proven in this baseball tournament that it is no joke. But last night the bats showed up, and they showed up down 2-0 and in a big way, and they blew it open. And Liam Doyle came out of the pen. I mean, this guy's going to be the first or second pick in the draft, and he puts his future aside for the team, and that is something that does not happen as much in today's hired gun society. And it only happens when you want to win for the team, which I appreciate. And 5 straight supers, that is good for Tennessee. And 4 straight non-super regionals, that is bad for Vanderbilt, as is losing to Wright State, as is having the number 1 overall seed and not even making the regional finals. That is bad for Tim Corbin. But that doesn't erase Vanderbilt's 3-1 record versus Tennessee this year. And that doesn't erase Vanderbilt's 10-0 victory in the SEC tournament. And that doesn't erase the SEC championship this year. And that doesn't erase the fact that Vanderbilt has 2 national titles to Tennessee's 1. As of right now, and again, these things are fluid. So 2 weeks ago, when I said that Vanderbilt had taken the top spot back, again, it's fluid. Just like it was fluid last year when Tennessee won the national title, and I said Tennessee had taken the top spot. Vanderbilt is still, even though they had the most disastrous weekend you could have in college baseball, they are still on top in the state. And I believe that they will continue to be on top of the state until Tennessee beats Arkansas this weekend in the Super Regional. If they beat Arkansas, which is absolutely no sure thing, and it's personal, by the way, between Fayetteville and Tony Vitello, for whatever reason. You know, he was an assistant coach there under Van Horn, and I guess they didn't end on great terms. But if they beat Arkansas in Fayetteville and they go back to Omaha, then I will say that the crown goes back to Tennessee. But for right now, it's Vandy. And here's why. Once you've gotten to Omaha a couple of times, and once you've won the national championship, the supers are good. And you certainly rather be in the super regional than not in the super regional. But it's not really that big of a deal. It's the Sweet 16 of baseball. And when you're a premier program, and we'll use college basketball as an example, when you're a premier program, the Sweet 16 just isn't really that big of a deal. Again, go to Cameron Indoor Stadium. And maybe there are, I don't know, are there Sweet 16 banners hanging up there? Or is it only Final Four and national championships? Baseball's a little different because Omaha is essentially the Elite 8. But when you're a premier baseball program, getting to the Super Regional, that's the expectation. When you pay Tony Vitello the kind of money Tennessee is paying Tony Vitello, that is the expectation, is to make the Super Regional. Again, my school, Louisville, had not been to the NCAA tournament since 2022, which is kind of crazy to think about. Especially, this is what makes me feel really old, is that 2022 feels like it was about 5 minutes ago. And so they haven't gone to the NCAA tournament for 2 years. This is a premier program we're talking about. And so they have not been to the NCAA tournament since 2022. They went to the Super Regional, lost Texas A&M. And they're back in the Supers because they won this regional. And, like, it's great. But the Louisville AD turned to me at the end of the Wright State game before it was over, and he said, what do you think the level of celebration will be? Like, what do you think the dog pile will be if they win? And I said, you know, I really hope it's a let's just high five and shake hands. Now, there was a little, hugging at the beginning of it, but it wasn't a true dog pile. It wasn't guys on the ground rolling around. It wasn't. It was some hugging and jumping and then, okay, let's high five. Granted, a lot of that was probably because we beat Wright State, but still, we're not going to hang a banner because we made the Super Regional this year. And again, we're a program that doesn't even have a national championship. So, again, Kentucky basketball always brags about, we don't care about Sweet 16s. When you're not a good program, or when you're a group of 5 school, getting to the Super Regional is a big deal. It is a big deal to Valdosta State if they make a Super Regional. Although I don't really even think that Valdosta State's Division I, so I don't think they can. But it's a big deal. No disrespect to Belmont. It's a big deal if Belmont or Lipscomb make it to a Super Regional. It's not a big deal for an elite program. And again, I'd like to consider Louisville as an elite program. So it's not really that big of a deal that we made it to the Super Regional. We take 2 out of 3 from Miami and end up in Omaha. It's a massive deal. So for Tennessee, congratulations. It was a tough regional. You played your butts off in the regional last night. You hit the baseball. You outplayed Wake Forest, which again is a good school. And Vanderbilt had an absolute nightmare of a weekend. And I'm not doubting any of that. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just telling you, acting as if that is a tangible step forward in the rivalry really puts you down as a program, because it's telling me that you care about things that, again, non-elite programs value. I remember when Vanderbilt made the Super Regional with Jeremy Sowers in 2004 and got smoked by Texas. And it felt like such a monumental appearance because they had never done it. And it was like, wow. Now the expectation is Vanderbilt should get to the Super Regional, and it is a total disgrace that they didn't. So let's have this talk next week, but not this week. Again, the Supers, they're nice, but for premier programs, the Sweet 16 doesn't move the needle for Kansas, and it shouldn't for your baseball program. Not for what you're paying your coach, what you're paying your players, and what you all think your program really is. 615-737-1025 is the phone number. That's 615-737-1025. Although, I got to say this, David Reed's UT take, I mean, I still think that's wild. Again, this is a UT football season ticket holder. And David Reed does not like Vitello and does not like the UT baseball team. Amazing. Add that to the table, too. 615-737-1025. There was one thing last night that happened that, I used to be against. I used to really have a hard time with. But I actually kind of understand it and am actually kind of okay with it. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game.
Our guys' response to being down was equally insane, but probably the biggest thing I think were guys doing things they struggled throughout the year doing, 1 through 9. And then our guys that are just willing to take the ball. I'm telling you, it is a weird deal on this staff to have that many guys that want the ball no matter what day it is or what the circumstances are. Snead was willing to go 100 pitches today. I feel for the guys that didn't get action because everybody was available. Marcus Phillips, it would have had to be like, I don't know. And even Art was joking around about being out there. So I know it's in a unique way because, Frank is pretty hard on these guys and he gets results out of it. But there's a lot of trust and a lot of love there between the pitchers and Coach A. And, of course, there's other people that help out too. So maybe that's got something to do with it, that they want to pitch for the boys and not just themselves, which I greatly appreciate and benefited from today as well.
I got to love this about Tony Vitello. You cannot take that frat boy out of him. Where he's like, hey, our boys, they want to pitch for the boys. Not, hey, we got a lot of guys. Everybody wants the ball. It would have been tough to get Marcus in there, but everybody wanted the ball. And obviously Liam went out there and he did his thing. And these guys really wanted to put the team first. Nope, he had to say, these guys, they want to pitch for the boys. So that's your frat boy coach, Tony Vitello, which Tennessee fans love and apparently David Reed hates. But we'll put that to the side for a second. Because I do want to talk about Liam Doyle last night coming back to pitch on Monday night, which would be short rest. And I used to really dislike this. It's something that happens far too often in college baseball, which is a high-end draft prospect, and Liam Doyle is projected to go number 1 or number 2 in the Major League Baseball draft, coming back on short rest of a regional. Tim Corbin is notorious for doing this. He started Mike Minor in a regional in 2009 and brought him back to start on Monday, brought him in on Friday, started on Friday, pitched a fair amount of the game, and then started again on Monday night, and then was a top 10 draft choice. He did this with David Price. He's done it with Sonny Gray. Again, Tim Corbin does not care. And we see this more and more now in college baseball, which is the number 1 guy goes on Friday night, and then if you need him in the elimination game on Monday, they say, Skip, give me the ball. And the manager says, or I guess in the case of college head coach says, all right, give him the ball. And every single MLB evaluator will scream bloody murder and cry a river about it. Major League Baseball, they are so hell-bent on pitch counts for young guys, and the reason we have so many Tommy Johns and the this and the that. But I'm really not all that concerned anymore with Liam Doyle's future. That's on Liam Doyle. He's a grown man. And I had somebody talk to me about this weekend because we were just talking about the state of baseball and where it's headed. And, now we're paying the players. And I'm sure some players got paid before. Obviously, they got paid to a certain extent. Probably the Olympic sports, the non-revenue sports, the women's basketballs and the baseballs, probably not as much as they're getting paid now because these schools want to win more than they ever have. But now that we're paying the players, I have to ask, can you really worry about your draft stock and not want to pitch? I mean, I understand that you only get so many bites at the apple, and the money in Major League Baseball, especially if you're a high draft choice, it is big. And if you make it in the big leagues, it is massive. Paul Skeens, whenever he's ready to sign a contract in 5 years or whatever it is going to sign for about $1 gazillion. And if you're Liam Doyle, you have to really wave that in your mind of, hey man, if I'm going out there and risking it. But how much is UT paying Liam Doyle? And sure, the major league teams are not going to like decisions like that. Keith Law, who covers Major League Baseball and really the prospects and the draft and everything else for The Athletic, and I love Keith Law. But Keith Law, who's been covering baseball prospects forever, used to work in the front office, he goes bananas when these coaches will throw a guy for 100 pitches on Friday and then bring him back on Sunday for 48 more pitches and then bring him back the next weekend, and he just goes nuts about these college coaches and ruining these kids' futures and how selfish it is of the coach to put his own interest ahead of the interest of the player. And I understand that major league teams don't like it and major league evaluators don't like it, but the major leagues have decided to downsize the minor leagues because they think they can farm out more of the player development to the colleges. They look at it and say, hey, instead of coming to us and going to A-ball, these guys are going to go get paid and get paid more money to go to college where they have better coaches. Who do you think's a better coach? The manager in A-ball or Tim Corbin? So they have the chance to go around better coaches, better facilities, better strength and conditioning. You know, these guys get to live real college lives and grow up a little bit, and then we get to draft them. Well, if you're going to do that, then you have to understand that the interest of where they're going is not going to be the same as the interest when they're your property as a player for you in A-ball. And I used to think that a coach that did that was selfish, and I used to think that it was harming the player, and I used to scream all about it. I used to think it was absolutely irresponsible to bring a kid like Liam Doyle back on short rest. I'm sorry. UT is paying Liam Doyle to pitch for UT. They are not paying Liam Doyle to go pitch for the Washington Nationals. They're paying him to pitch for UT. And not only that, Liam Doyle's a grown man. And if he went to Tony Vitello and said, Skip, give me the ball. Well, who's Tony Vitello to tell this grown man that he's paying a bunch of money to not to go and take the ball and get us into the super regionals? So I have totally changed my tune on that. I used to hate it when they would bring guys back on short rest. Though I also think the bigger problem, the reason we're having more arm injuries, and I am not James Andrews, I am certainly no expert. I think the reason we're having more injuries is because the kids are trying to throw too hard more than they're throwing too much. Like everybody's trying to throw 103 miles an hour now. And I get it. If I could throw 103 miles an hour, I'd want to throw it too. But there is something to be said for the fact that guys like Greg Maddux and Tom Glavine used to never get hurt. And it was probably because they didn't throw the ball a gazillion miles an hour every time they dropped back to throw it. So, again, I guess that's another little rant there. But I see, you know, if you're going to pay the players, their job is to go out there and go win for UT and forget about what the major leagues think and what the player evaluators think and everything else. If you want that, go pay me to not go to college. It was funny. I was talking with somebody this weekend and I was saying, you know, I remember when I was in school and I was never a good enough player. I mean, I wasn't even a good player. So I was never a good enough player to where playing Division I sports was going to be an option or playing in the pros was going to be an option. So it's all hypothetical anyways. But we used to talk about how, you know, if I were drafted, would I go to college or would I go straight to the minor leagues? And the slot money in baseball is so high. Like I think the first overall pick, the slot's like $10 million. It's hard to turn that down. Like I think I would tell, well, I used to always say Jared Jr. I think I would tell Jack if he is like the number one player in the country and the slot value is $10 million, I think I'd be like, Jack, you need to go play baseball. Even though I know you want to go to college, etc. But if I'm not getting $10 million, I'm going to college. I mean, look at these teams that are still playing. Beautiful campuses, beautiful facilities, beautiful parts of the country, beautiful women on those campuses. Go play ball. 615-737-1025. Chris in Nashville says, did you see Murray State celebrate last night? I have not seen the Murray State celebration. Did they go nuts? I have no idea. I got to tell you, I watched the UT Wake game, and then when UT broke it open, and I think the seventh inning, I turned it off. And I didn't watch Miami and Southern Miss, even though Miami, who ended up winning, you know, was going to decide whether or not Louisville was hosting the Super Regionals. I didn't watch anything else other than that. So you tell me, did they celebrate too much or not? 615-737-1025. David Reed, the text line's mad at you.
And I care this much.
Well, you can address the text line next. Stillman and Company, 1025 1063 The Game. And let me tell all the fine folks out there, do not miss out on Nashville's best deals. Great offers are out there for 312 Pizza Company, Beach Bend Amusement Park and Splash Lagoon Water Park, Central Barbecue, Fog Street Lawn Club, and more. Get them now while supplies last at thegamenashville.com. All right, let's talk about Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. They are proud supporters of the Vols and very happy about them making it to the Super Regional. Have you ever called a plumber, electrician, or HVAC tech and felt like they were trying to sell you something that you do not need? Hand in the air. That was me before I got Hiller. That's right. If a deal sounds too good to be true, like a $99 club membership or a $29 tune-up, it probably is. The reality is they have to find something to fix so they can cover their costs for these discounted club memberships. Unlike other guys, Hiller never offers deals designed to trick you or sell you something that you do not need. And you hear me talking about my friends at Hiller all the time. But see, this is why I trust Hiller in my home. They do a great job, and they'll do a great job for you. So schedule online at happyhiller.com. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. Hiller, call the Happy Face Truck today.
tonight. And Tony, what was the vision for Liam tonight? Was it a guarantee he would pitch? Was it a situation? And what was your thought going into it?
Just knew I was very prepared for the moment. I feel like I've gone through a ring now in the SEC, being there for 2 years, took in a lot of information last year, my first year, had some up and downs, and knew after all the build-up after this year, I'd be ready for what was my task. And, arm felt good enough yesterday, arm felt great today, and just going out there and giving my team a chance to win. And really, like Coach had the trust in me to go out there and close the game for us tonight.
There you go. That was Liam Doyle. He decided to get out there, take the ball on Monday night. And I will tell you, he was fired up when he struck out that Wake Forest batter in the 7th, and then the bats came out. So when it comes to David Reed has decided that he, as a UT season ticket holder, and Reed, if I'm wrong about this, stop me and correct me. As a UT football season ticket holder, you have decided you do not like this Tennessee baseball team.
Correct. And it's something,
and you just don't like them because
just
of their...
like, it's not something, I mean, it's been a kind of an ongoing thing. Like, these guys to me have gotten out of control. I think they are very much a reflection of Tony Vitello, and that I do not mean that in any kind way whatsoever.
Is this an opinion, though, that you have on this team, or is this something from that 2022 team that was absolutely over the top?
This team is not that different from that 2022 team, except they just they don't score as many runs. That's
those
the only
guys were
difference.
flipping the bird, running the bases. What are we talking about?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't. Do you think these guys aren't still circling the bases, talking trash and flipping bats towards the other dugouts and cussing out the umpires like we saw Cannon Peebles do last night?
Dylan in Antioch says Reed is 100% right. Liam Doyle looked like he had just done 2 lines of coke before he took the mound. Chill out, guy. Act like you've been there before. I got to say that I got to defend Doyle. I mean, he was pumped up when he struck out the kid from Wake Forest, but that was a big moment in that. And you see guys even in the big leagues in the playoffs, and this is the playoffs of college baseball. You see guys in the big leagues in the playoffs that go nuts when they strike somebody out. So I don't have a problem with the way Doyle acted last night, but I do think that is fair. I mean, again, he's got like the one unbutton coming down and he's running out there and he's got the 8 Mile song going or whatever. I did think that was a little over the top. Adam in Portland says, yuck, David Reed. Go Big Orange. The Vols' charm is that most people do hate them. Tony Vitello has built a juggernaut, and even when they aren't at their best, they're still extremely good and have a chance to make a lot of noise in the regional. Not likable. Shh. Your thoughts?
He just agreed with everything I said. They're not likable. Like, this team is not likable. And it has nothing to do with their success. It has to do with the personalities and their antics on the field. That's what it has to do with. Yeah, they're winning. That's going to set some people off. Like, people didn't like Vanderbilt when Vanderbilt was winning. But it wasn't because the character of the team. Like, I don't like what I saw from Tim Corbin and his reaction to losing this weekend, but I would take Tim Corbin at Tennessee over Tony Vitello and two more national championships. Character
so, like, right
to
now,
me.
If Vanderbilt is playing Tennessee for the national championship in baseball, which obviously we know is never going to happen, but let's just say the good Lord would not bless us with that middle of June Tennessee Vanderbilt in Omaha on the radio. But let's say it happens. You right now would root for Vanderbilt over Tennessee.
I want the good people to win.
But Tim Corbin showed his ass this weekend.
I know,
too.
I
mean, he's not like Vitello.
I know, and I said that was very much out of character for him. He's had his outbursts over the years, and that one was very much out of character for him. But this is kind of an every season thing for this group since Tony Vitello's taken over.
One texter says, I, sir, am a Vols fan, and I don't understand why any Vols fan would get cocky unless alcohol is involved. Well, oftentimes alcohol
most of the times it is.
It is very often. The Razorbacks are a really good team. The Vols better bring their big boy pants and play smart baseball, or they are out. Go Vols. Vol fans do not give a rat's ass what other people think about them. Vol fans can be psychotic over their Vols. So does it sound like that guy's agreeing with you or not agreeing with you? Let me say this. I mean, Arkansas has a great program, but Dave Van Horn over there, he can't win any national championships. Tony Vitello's already won one.
Yeah, well, I think this may be their chance. I think they're going to handle Tennessee very easily this weekend.
Based off of what?
Based on them sweeping them just about a month ago. I didn't sweep them, taking 2 out of 3 from them about a month ago.
I think you're basing that off of the fact that you want UT to lose.
No, I don't want that. I don't wish them to lose. I wish them to win better.
Chris in Nashville says you're hoity-toity. You drink Pinot Grigio with your cheese.
Yeah, I don't drink, so.
There you go. I don't really drink either. Now, it's not because I don't do whatever, but I would not be drinking Pinot Grigio. I actually find wine to be disgusting. And all of the hoity-toity stuff, to me, I don't do charcuterie boards. I don't like any of that. And I would like to say that I'm somebody who has some expensive taste on certain things, albeit I do oftentimes buy my clothes from Costco, but I do not do the charcuterie boards and the Pinot Grigios and the things like that. One texter says, David Reed is a grown man and can have his own opinion, but the most people that don't like Tony Vitello are the ones that don't care and just see clips about his attitude. I bet he didn't see how much his players embrace him or how Liam Doyle said there's no one else in the world he'd rather play for. I would love for him to bring up a single instance in which Tony Vitello directly badmouthed another team or another coach.
I can't bring up an instance of that, but running onto the field and pushing an umpire, is that the example?
That's bad look.
That's the example that you want for your 18, your 20-year-old kid? Is that what you want your 13-year-old who loves baseball to see? You want him to go play for that guy?
I have a hard time with this. And again, Liam Doyle went out there and pitched yesterday, and I appreciate that. But this idea of there's nobody else in the world I'd rather play for. Well, if another school offered you more money, would you rather go play for that coach? Kind of feels like you would. It's kind of hard for me to listen to things like that and think that it's, anything extra. Devin from Dover says you're not a real Tennessee fan.
Okay.
Another texter says the problem with UT baseball is they can dish out the trash talk, but they get butt hurt when the trash talk comes their way. That's Charles from College Grove. I mean, Tennessee fans, Matt Jones told me about this. Kentucky Sports Radio said this to me a couple of years ago, and it's so spot on. He said, and I forget exactly what we were talking about, but he was like, the two schools I don't like are Louisville and Tennessee. And everybody knows that. Jared, you went to Louisville. I don't like Louisville and I don't like Tennessee. But Louisville's been so bad lately, especially in basketball, that their fans have kind of gone away, and it makes hating them less fun. Tennessee can lose every game by 50 and be 2-8, and they think they're going to win the next game by 80. And there is something to that with Tennessee fans. I said this to Chris Fowler, at the Super Bowl a couple of years ago when he came on the show, and he looked at me like I was crazy, and I said, Tennessee is the only SEC school. Now, I don't know how Oklahoma and Texas feel about Tennessee, although the real UT thing probably leads me to believe that a lot of Texas fans hate Tennessee. But Tennessee is the only school that I feel like is truly hated by every other SEC school. Now, a lot of that is because Tennessee is truly hated by Vanderbilt, and I don't think Vanderbilt hates a whole lot of SEC schools. So it makes it easy to justify it by saying, does Vanderbilt really hate Missouri? Does Vanderbilt really hate Florida? Does Vanderbilt, but we all know they really hate Tennessee. Everybody else, their fans, hate Tennessee. And they hate Tennessee fans. Mississippi State hates Tennessee. Arkansas hates Tennessee. Florida hates Tennessee. Kentucky hates Tennessee. Vandy hates Tennessee. They all hate Tennessee. Now, again, I don't know about Oklahoma. Does Oklahoma hate Tennessee? That I don't know. But until they changed it, that was the one where it was the one school that I felt like every single SEC fan base enjoyed watching lose. I truly believe that Kentucky fans enjoy watching Tennessee lose. Vandy fans enjoy watching Tennessee lose. LSU fans, and again, they're not LSU's biggest rival, but I think LSU fans enjoy watching Tennessee lose. And I have always believed that. How many SEC fan bases, SEC schools, actually care if Arkansas wins or loses in basketball, football, or baseball? I just don't think it's that many. Like, I'm an SEC fan. Granted, I'm a Louisville fan, but I grew up in the South as an SEC. Who cares about South Carolina? Tennessee? I think everybody likes, when Tennessee loses, unless you're a Tennessee fan. Again, I think they're the Dallas Cowboys of the SEC. Because when Dallas gets their asses kicked on TV, and I mean, it's just a bludgeoning. The other team scoring a touchdown, Dak throws an interception. The TV cameras go right up to the box, and they put the camera right on Jerry, and you can always see the disgust in Jerry's face. You can see it. And I think most people around the country enjoy that. That's why Fox keeps showing it. Now, the Cowboys have the most fans, but they also have more people rooting against them because the Cowboys and their fans, I think, are obnoxious. And I think UT's kind of the same way. That's just me. That was some weird rant that came out of nowhere. We'll get back to your phones. 615-737-1025. Plus, I have another college baseball thought that I want to get into because there's one thing about this weekend that is starting to piss me off. And we will get to that. 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company, 1025, 106 the game.
the potential for a second game tomorrow affect your decision as to how you go about your?
I don't give a rat's ass about a second game. All I care about is Wright State. That's it.
Tim, what was the issue with the offense today?
No, we didn't score enough runs. Issue?
Yeah,
Human?
it was so different from the last couple weeks when.
You play playoff baseball, are you? I mean, it's tough pitching on both sides. I mean, we're pitching hard. They're pitching hard. Two good teams. You realize that, right? These are good pitchers on the mound. These are battles. We just didn't win the battle. Don't go searching for like a lot of ancillary bullshit. It's just we didn't get the hit.
There you go. That was Tim Corbin over the weekend. And I did not think that was his finest moment. I spanked him pretty hard on the Tookus yesterday for that. My dad was like, I think you were a little hard on Corbin. I'm like, are you going to get up there and be like, did you play playoff baseball? Dude, you didn't get an extra base hit. You didn't get a hit against Wright State's pitcher with an ERA of 5 for the first 6 innings of the game. Give me a break. But actually, it's not Tim Corbin's behavior that I want to talk about, although this is apparently a trend in college baseball, where some of these college baseball coaches just think that they are God's gift to the world and think that they are so beyond reproach because they coach college baseball. So, in the Florida Regional, which they did not win, I believe it was at East Carolina or was it Coastal Carolina, one of the Carolinas, and the other Carolina school was there. They pushed back the game time by an hour. I don't know why. I'm guessing it's related to weather. I don't know. And so either the East Carolina coach or the Coastal Carolina coach, can't remember which one, at his press conference, basically ripped the Florida coach, Kevin O'Sullivan, a new rear end about the way that he treated the NCAA site rep and the way he treated their assistant athletic directors and kind of the coaching, again, the people that aren't associated with baseball that are running the tournament with the way he treated them. It was caught on video, and this Florida coach was just screaming at the NCAA baseball rep. It was embarrassing. Then the Florida coach had the stones to get up there and say, I don't have a problem with how I acted. Well, apparently he did have a problem with how he acted because yesterday he, along with his athletic director, put out a statement in which they basically said, yeah, no, that's bad behavior. Scott Strickland saying this afternoon, I met with Kevin O'Sullivan and told him that his actions prior to yesterday's NCAA tournament game fell short of expectations of how Gators treat people. And then Kevin O'Sullivan released a statement again after saying, after the game, I don't regret how I treated people. He says, prior to yesterday's NCAA tournament game against East Carolina, I let my emotions get the best of me and channeled that energy in a way I should not have. And again, it goes on and on and on, where he apologizes to Coastal Carolina, East Carolina, and Fairfield, and the NCAA, including site representatives Rick French and Mark Scalf, as well as all of Gator Nation. So he had to come out at, tail between legs and apologize. Then the Wake Forest coach yesterday during the game was caught on camera. And I am not a lip reader, but it seemed pretty obvious that he used the F word, which you can't say, and he used another word that starts with F, which is a slur directed towards homosexuals. And I think that that is totally over the line. And again, I am not somebody that's a great lip reader. It was pretty obvious. And this morning, John Curry, the athletic director of Wake Forest, and Tom Walter, the head coach at Wake Forest, put out a statement. Curry saying, I am both surprised and deeply disappointed in our head baseball coach for his outburst during last night's game. I feel badly for those most hurt by such words. I spoke with Coach Walter immediately after the game and again this morning to address this incident. Tom Walter said, I'm very sorry for my outburst and frustration last night and recognize the hurt and disappointment that it caused. I mean, I just say this is not the great way to kick off Pride Month, Tom. Here's what bothers me. In both instances, and I understand I'm not a baseball coach. I got it. In both instances, if I did either thing at my job, I'm probably getting fired. If I use the word, and I don't use that word, but if I use the word that Tom Walter used in the dugout yesterday and got caught on camera saying, I'm fired. Fired. The end. If I'm caught on camera just absolutely berating somebody for just doing their job, for something that's so reasonable, I'm fired. And most of you are the same way. Are we really just going to take that and say, okay, well, they apologize. They put out a statement on Twitter, so it's all good. And again, I'm not saying they should fire these guys, but I do think there needs to be some sort of real penalty here to deter these college baseball coaches from thinking that they are just untouchable. Again, dude, you're a college baseball coach. With all due respect, you're a glorified PE teacher. And if your PE teacher treated people that way, or your PE teacher used those words, your PE teacher would be out of a job. So just give me a break. You college baseball coaches, get over yourselves. Aria, have you ever played college baseball? I don't know, Tim. Have you ever written for the paper? Because I guarantee I bet you got opinions on what she's written. So it's very disappointing. These grown men make a lot of money to be college baseball coaches. And not one of these guys is making their salaries worth for the university. This isn't like football or basketball. When it comes to football and they pack the stadium with 70,000, 80,000, 100,000 fans, Nick Saban is worth every penny to the University of Alabama when he's the coach. These guys are making $1 million, and I'd be shocked if one of them is bringing in $500,000 in revenue. I'm talking about in revenue. None of these baseball programs make money. So give me a break. And by the way, I think this will happen, and it'll come out, later during the summer. I do think the NCAA will probably suspend Kevin O'Sullivan, and they'll suspend the Wake Forest coach for, a tournament game next year. This has happened in the past where the head coach, does something and then they get suspended down the road. I think that probably will be what ends up happening here. 615-737-1025 here on the program. If you want to weigh in, that's 615-737-1025 on Stillman and Company. The Titans have had some great attendance as far as OTAs are concerned, but I wonder if Brian Callahan is even a little disappointed with one guy in particular. We'll get to that coming up next. 615-737-1025. The PFL World Championship semifinals are Thursday, June 12th at Municipal Auditorium, and you can be there. Text in the keyword match, MATCH, to 615-737-1025 now to be entered to win a pair of VIP ringside tickets. Visit pflmma.com/schedule for more details. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. So I do want to hit on Titans OTAs, and I want to hit on a story that was a big deal last week. Again, 2 weeks ago, Brian Callahan met with the media for really kind of the first time post-draft, post-rookie mini camp. Now it was like the beginning of OTAs. And he brought up how, I thought long and hard about the mistakes that we made last season, because we made too many of them. And I thought long and hard about how to fix them. And I decided what I wanted to do was I wanted to really harp on teamwork, leadership development, and accountability. And so while I did all of that, I came up with this new formula for 8 teams that are going to be representing all of the players, and they're going to mix offense, defense, and special teams, and they're going to have team captains and assistant captains, and you're going to be held accountable, and we're all going to work together, and we're all going to learn how to tote the rope in the same direction while also getting better at football. And I laughed at it because I thought it was funny. I laughed at it. And I thought it was a little embarrassing. I thought it was a little minor league-ish. I thought it was a little Disney-esque. And so we made fun of it. But regardless of whether or not we made fun of it, it's still a big deal that that's what he thinks is going to be what takes them from 3-14 and makes them better. Then last week, Paul Kaharski reported that the Titans had all but perfect attendance because one guy, Jeffrey Simmons, decided not to show up for OTAs. Now, OTAs are voluntary, so Jeffrey Simmons doesn't have to be there. Next week will be the mandatory minicamp. Simmons does have to be at that. And so while Kevin Zeitler wasn't spotted on the football field, and Tavondre Sweat wasn't spotted on the football field, and L'Jarius Sneed and Tyler Lockett weren't spotted on the football field, as PK reported, the one guy who chose to be absent was Jeffrey Simmons. And I thought, my God, Jeffrey Simmons is trying to be a leader. Jeffrey Simmons always tells us he's trying to be the team spokesman every time he says something stupid. And it's like, oh my God, and now he doesn't even show up? Jeffrey Simmons put out a workout video over the weekend. I think he heard the noise, considering that his previous video was about proving the haters wrong and included a made-up quote from me, which, by the way, I do wonder if we should send a cease and desist on Jeffrey Simmons with, because I didn't say what he said I said. That being said, I'm not going to. But again, I wouldn't make up something he said. But Jeffrey Simmons put out a video over the weekend of him training. Again, it's not like I didn't think Jeffrey Simmons was working, but if Brian Callahan's grand plan is going to be leadership development, teamwork, and accountability, you as a leader, if you really believe in the coach, if you believe in what he's preaching, if you're not mad at the coach or mad at the organization, you get your ass to OTAs. Simmons didn't. Today, the Titans had another open OTA to the media, and this is how Brian Callahan kicked off his opening statement today.
Don't have much of an opening statement for you today. The only player that for sure is going to be absent for illness reasons is Curtis Jacobs. He's sick today. Everything else is pretty much status quo. Nothing much changed from last week. So we'll keep pressing forward.
Okay. And then Jim Wyatt put out a tweet that said that the only player that will be absent that wasn't absent last week was Curtis Joseph. So if we're to believe the reporting that PK has, which is there was one guy absent last week, that was Jeffrey Simmons, and there's 2 guys absent this week, Curtis Joseph, who has an excused absence because Curtis Joseph is sick, then it would lead us to believe that Jeffrey Simmons is also absent. And I find it odd that Brian Callahan, who normally has said when it comes to OTAs, when he's asked about players' availability and things of that magnitude, always says, guys are doing different things and I'm not going to comment. It's voluntary, so I'm not going to comment about who's here versus who's not here and blah, blah, blah. But he opened his press conference saying, hey, Curtis Joseph is not going to be. For everybody out there that wants to know, is Curtis Joseph going to be out there? The answer is no. He's saying, hey, the only guy that, was here last week that's not going to be here is Curtis Joseph. You do the math. I wonder if Brian Callahan is getting fed up with Simmons. And I wonder if that, by starting his press conference, again, I don't really have a lot to tell you guys to open up with the statement, but Curtis Joseph will not be out there. He's sick today. He called me this morning. He's running a fever of 102. The doctor we've got him pumped full of IVs and Claritin. We're going to hope that he's better tomorrow. And if he's not, we'll give him a Xanax or something. I don't know. He's like telling you, oh, his absence is excused. He's the only one. By the way, who the hell's Curtis Joseph? I wonder if he's getting upset with Simmons. And I wonder if that Simmons video was enough to push Callahan, who, again, never seems to ever push back. I wonder if that's enough to get Callahan kind of pissed off. That Callahan's going to look at the situation and say, here I am fighting for my job. Simmons goes on the Jill Jelnick podcast and says, I talked with Callahan at the end of the year, and I believe in him, and I believe in Denard, and I believe that, I have to take the steps as a leader to do this and blah, blah, blah. But then when it comes time to show up for OTAs, when, again, the head coach has said, the head coach has made it very clear that he thinks this team working together in the offseason is going to help them compete during the season. I mean, he really means it. And Jeffrey Simmons still blows it off. I wonder if Callahan has reached the point that a lot of us realized a long time ago, which is that Jeffrey Simmons is a lot of talk and very little chalk. How many times in this post-Derrick Henry era, how many times has Simmons gone out there and said something and then either 5 minutes later looks like a complete moron, or even in that moment, it's easy to point and laugh? Remember last year when they got embarrassed by Washington and Simmons said, well, I think a lot of us were too hungover from celebrating our win against Houston. Really? You're the worst team in the NFL. You're celebrating your win over. Really? Or last year before the Green Bay game when he said, nobody runs the ball on the Tennessee Titans, only to have Malik and Josh Jacobs run for 350 yards. Jeffrey Simmons is a good player, and he's the right guy to have when you've got about 5 or 6 other leaders ahead of him. And the toothpaste is out of the tube here because the Titans, and I think a lot of this had to do with not signing A.J. Brown, which made signing Jeffrey Simmons seem even more important. But I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that Jeffrey Simmons is not mature enough to be a true leader. And Callahan has given Simmons the benefit of the doubt on everything. Whether it's the fight he got in at practice last year and didn't get kicked out, whether it was the argument with Buck on the sideline. When is the last time a Jeffrey Simmons headline has been positive other than Jeffrey Simmons nominated for the Walter Payton Man of the Year Award, and I still don't know exactly what he does? So I wonder if today, if Brian Callahan really, when he got up there with his opening statement telling you that Curtis Joseph was the only guy who's been here who's going to be out because the great Curtis Joseph is sick, was really Callahan saying, I want you all to know Jeffrey Simmons hasn't been here and Jeffrey Simmons isn't going to be here, and it's starting to bother me too. Especially after Simmons put out a workout video of him working out at some gym. Dude, you're in the NFL. You're supposed to work out. You know what else you're supposed to do? You're supposed to, if you're a leader, if you're one of the higher paid players on the team, if you think you're the team spokesperson the way Kevin Byard was before you, you're supposed to be there at OTAs when the coach is trying to set the tone so that you'll have a better season than you had last year. So I do wonder if today this was a message from Brian Callahan to Jeffrey Simmons. 615-737-1025. We'll get your thoughts in on that. Add that to the table. 615-737-1025. Did Brian Callahan show his displeasure today with Jeffrey Simmons? We'll hit on your phones, and we will do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game.
Like I said, just that was my first time going through a coaching change in NFL. I've been through it in college. I think the biggest thing was, trying to figure out this new culture that we're trying to build. And, because everybody knew the Vrabel culture. You came in, everybody knew. Like, everybody hearing how Vrabel coached, and, that you hear about All Foundation and the culture that he established way before you got there. I heard about it. They said when I first got drafted, people were telling me about Vrabel, this and that, I'm like, okay. But when I got there, it made even more sense. And I was under there for 5 years. So I think that also was not even, I wouldn't say a shock. It was more like, now it's time to really adapt to this new culture, being there doing OTAs and figure out, how Cali want things. And, and I think even with me and Cali, we had a great conversation at the end of the season just about how things could get better, as a team and as a head coach. And, he's one of them guys that want to be a great head coach in this league. And, I can see that happening. So, and one thing I always say, even throughout the season when things was getting tough, like I told the media and I told you guys that I believed in what Cali preaching. I believe in Denora and everything they telling us that, we're going to get to that point eventually.
I believe Jeffrey Simmons said. That was on Jill Jelnick's Nashville's Game Changers podcast. I need to know when that was recorded because that sounds like someone that really believes in Brian Callahan. And yet, do you believe in OTAs? No. Like, no. I said I believe, not that I believe in OTAs, not that I believe in what the coach is trying to preach. Again, Callahan's the one that set himself up for this by getting out in front of everybody and talking about how transformative the leadership, games that he was setting up were going to be. And the Titans have highlighted this by putting out videos of rock, paper, scissors and tug of war. And yet Jeffrey Simmons is nowhere to be found. You can't have it both ways. You can't say this is fundamental in terms of our success, starting at ground zero, and then say, but we don't need Jeffrey Simmons, one of our highest paid, best players, to be there since, again, we think he's a leader. You can't have it both ways. Let's go to Adam. Phone line driven by Wilson County, Hyundai.com at 615-737-1025. Adam, go ahead.
So I wanted Simmons traded at the draft, and you said, well, if you do that, then you're going to have to replace Jeffrey Simmons. And I think we already have. I don't think he's the best defensive tackle on the team, to be honest with you. Like, I think he is a lot of talk, and it's usually like it's not intelligent. Like, I'm not hearing anything from Jeffrey Simmons that makes me go, he's a leader, especially if you're a guy who has to call yourself a leader. I've never heard Manning or Brady have to call themselves a leader. It's known. It's a known thing. And this reminds me of when we had Mark Mariani as the guy, the front guy for season tickets back in the day. Like, we just don't have much right now. I hope Cam's the guy, but I see Jeffrey Simmons he's like a desperate pitch for us to have leadership. He's the furthest thing from it. And I don't think he's healthy for the football team, to be honest, because he's a very self-absorbed guy. Like, he acts like he's not, but then he's so easy to rattle, and that's not a leader. So I don't know. I'm just not a Jeffrey Simmons guy. I've been out on him.
I agree. I will say this, and I appreciate your call, Adam. I said last year when Jeffrey Simmons got all mad at the media, I find this to be so funny. Jeffrey Simmons has me blocked on Twitter. Again, I don't know what I did. I don't know what I said. And let me tell you, I do not care that Jeffrey Simmons has me blocked on Twitter. My favorite was when he signed his contract extension. He sent out a tweet like, Nashville, it's been real, or something like that. And then it was like, psych, I just signed my contract. But he put that out there, and Caroline sent me the tweet. And so she sends it to me, and I click it because I can see the tweet like on my phone. So I go to click it. And when I click it, it says like, it's not there, or you're blocked, or something like that. I'm like, oh, I guess I'm blocked from Jeffrey Simmons. I didn't know what happened, but again, that's his business, not mine. But the point being that last year when Jeffrey Simmons got mad at the local media for saying that Jamal Adams sucks, which Jamal Adams did suck, when Jeffrey Simmons got mad at the local media, I tweeted out that he was soft. And then he went on across the street in a safe space on their morning program where they wouldn't criticize a fly. They won't even ask Rand Carthon a real question. And Jeffrey Simmons says, I saw what somebody said in the media about me and they wouldn't say it to my face. I would say to Simmons' face. Again, saying it on the radio is the same as saying it to somebody's face because you're saying it in the public. He's soft. And when Simmons gets up there like, I believe in Denard, who gives a rat's ass what you believe in? Go sack the quarterback. Now, I do disagree with Adam. I do not think that T'Vondre Sweat is better than Simmons. I saw T'Vondre Sweat. Again, I haven't heard it because I wasn't there, but I did see, I think it was TD had a tweet where T'Vondre Sweat said, he changed his workout routine a little bit, just working on shoulders and arms. But other than that, everything's been the same this offseason. I'm like, oh, well, then I guess he's decided he doesn't need to sack the quarterback. He just needs to eat up the offensive guard and try to help stop the run, which the Titans were not good at last year. The tweet from TD, T'Vondre Sweat said he worked on little things like shoulders and arms this offseason, but didn't change much from last year. I'd like to change a little bit. They got Bruce Smith, a Stairmaster. And when Bruce Smith invested in the Stairmaster, they got a Stairmaster at the Bills facility. And then Bruce Smith got a Stairmaster at his house. And when Bruce Smith started to master the Stairmaster, he became Bruce Smith. I'm not saying T'Vondre Sweat is Bruce Smith. In fact, T'Vondre Sweat and Bruce Smith don't even play the same position. But I would like to see T'Vondre Sweat master the Stairmaster the way Bruce Smith did. Bob is up next here on our program. Bob, thank you for calling. Thank you for waiting. Go ahead.
Hey, Jared. More and more Simmons is acting like a non-leader. He's starting to remind me of somebody else. Some correlations I want to walk you through. They talked about the draft. The one person who was not up for trade was Jeffrey Simmons. So they're putting in that I'm untouchable. Well, it started to remind me of a certain coach we had that all of a sudden became untouchable. Like, if you fire him, he's going to be the first coach hired. And he got an ego so big. It seems to me that Simmons' ego and Vrabel's egos are going kind of the same way to where they're untouchable. And I think the only thing to happen is somehow, like you said earlier, I know he won't do it, but he's got to not make him a captain. I think that would send one heck of a message to the locker room if Callahan wants to. I think Simmons is way overrated. I mean, I think he's a decent player, but when you talk, best NFL at his position, I don't think anybody's going to say he's one of the top 5 or now in top 10 or 15. I think
he is not Chris Jones. He is not.
Trade him or get rid of him, but we're not going to.
Yeah, so, I just don't think the value's there to trade him. Thank you for the call. I just don't think the value is there. Like, if you told me that you could get a first-round pick for Simmons, I probably would make that trade. I just don't think you're going to get that. That being said, I think the difference between Vrabel and Simmons is I think Vrabel's a lot more self-aware. I think the thing with Vrabel at the end here was, I'm not saying he didn't care that he didn't get fired, but it was kind of like, I know that I'll get a job somewhere else, and I know that you people are stupid. Like, there's no doubt that went through his mind. Between Rand and Amy, it's like, I know you guys are morons, so I just, fine, go ahead and fire me. Whatever. I don't think Simmons has that feel. I think Simmons last year thought, I'm the new Derrick Henry. The problem is that you're nothing like Derrick Henry. You don't produce like Derrick Henry. You don't avoid saying stupid things like Derrick Henry. And you're not a leader like Derrick Henry. I'd say there's a big difference between Simmons and Vrabel. Again, Vrabel is, sometimes he can't help himself with his passive aggressiveness, but Vrabel is self-aware to a certain extent. 615-737-1025. Trevor Maddich will join us next. Trevor already texted me today. He's got a thought that he wants to start off on, so that's what we're going to do. 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. So yesterday, I saw a story at ESPN in which the headline was talking about the confidence Cam Ward has. And all I said yesterday was, I just don't understand how Cam Ward can be confident. How can he be confident? He's never played in the NFL. How can he be confident that he can play in the NFL? Now, if he goes out there in practice and starts lighting it up, then I think he can get confidence. If he goes out there in the preseason, the joint practices, and lights it up, then I think that builds confidence. If he goes out there week 1 at Denver and he throws for 225 and 4 touchdowns, just like Will Levis and Mariota did, I guess then he can get some confidence. But this idea that you got to see Cam, he's got so much confidence, I think we're mistaking confidence for optimism or positivity. And today, D-Mace totally disagreed and said everybody on the team is confident. Are they? Trevor Maddich joins us now, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trevor from ESPN. So, Trevor, you sent me a text earlier today. Your thoughts on Cam Ward and the confidence that the Titans and everybody associated with the Titans say that he is just bursting with.
I agree with you, Jared. You can't be confident unless you actually do something at the level that you're at. And I agree with D-Mace that you can have confidence in what you're doing now. I mean, Cam Ward has confidence in what he accomplished in college. He's got confidence in what he's been doing in the offseason program with Tennessee. It helps build his confidence to see his teammates respond to him. But until you actually do something in the NFL, you've got optimism, you've got hope, and you've got expectation, but it's hard to have confidence. And I think it's easier to describe when you talk about somebody who's not very good, or a bad team or an individual that's not very good. And the way they build confidence is not to listen to a motivational speaker. Now they've got confidence. Now they go out and they perform. Doesn't work that way. Performance precedes confidence. I mean, I do a lot of speaking, and this is one of the things we talk about in the corporate world, that the first thing, and it goes with the sports world, I mean, the first thing that you have to do is activity. You've got to do something. You don't get confidence because you read a book. When you have activity, that leads to motivation because you see the results and the baby steps that you're taking. And then that motivation leads to better performance because now your activity continues to improve based on the motivation that you've got because you've seen the baby steps give you improvements. And once you're performing, that builds confidence. And that, you can see teams that have been college football teams that have been just horrifically bad. And all of a sudden they get a new coach, and the coach has them go out and run wind sprints in the snow. And he has them lift weights like they never have in their life. And he pushes them beyond what they think they can do. And the ones that stay don't develop confidence and then perform to the coach's expectation. They think the coach is nuts. But then all of a sudden they look in the mirror and they see their bellies are a little flatter and their biceps are a little bigger. Then they go out and play that next season, and instead of getting pushed around, they find that they're holding their own. Then that motivates them to do even more activity. And then the next year, they find they're not just holding their own, they're pushing other people around. And that's the process that builds confidence. This is what Cam Ward did in college. Cam Ward had great belief in himself, but what did he know about how he could throw in college? He didn't. He expected it. But when he went to Incarnate Word, he did it. And he excelled at it. And it was the activity that led to motivation to continue the process he was on, that led to better performance, and that led to his confidence. Right now, he's got confidence in what he's currently doing because by all accounts, he's impressing everybody, including, most importantly, his teammates. But until he goes out there and plays in an NFL game, then he hasn't performed in an NFL game. And so I wouldn't call it confidence. I would call what he has now expectation and hope. And like you have said, optimism. But see, this goes towards every young player, every player that's not very good, every team that's awful. And the Tennessee Titans had the number 1 pick in the draft this year because they were the worst team in the NFL. Put another way, they were the most putrid performing team in the NFL. And the way they're going to build confidence is not to read a book or listen to a speech or have a hotshot rookie come in. The way they're going to build confidence is by doing stuff that they've never done before, at least not at that level. Then they'll see small improvements. That'll motivate them to do more. That'll lead to better performance, and that's how you get confidence. So I agree with you when it comes to this, and actually they're in the process of doing it now. And I think that Coach Callahan is trying to goose it a little bit to give it some juice by having the off-season program set up the way he is. He's trying to create activity that will lead to incremental improvements that will then lead to the kind of confidence they'll need to win football games.
Trevor, I do struggle with one thing, which is, and the coaches I think have been so far a little bit better about this, but when it comes to the way the Titans are talking about Cam Ward and the way the fans are talking about Cam Ward, it reminds me a lot of Will Levis last year. Brian Callahan had a story that was written by Albert Breer, and I think Albert Breer is one of the better reporters, at Sports Illustrated, about how he told Rand Carthon, hey, I don't think we need to really evaluate the quarterbacks in the draft because these guys aren't as good as Will Levis. And I mean, we're talking about Drake May and J.J. McCarthy and those guys. And then they draft Cam Ward, and now there's an Albert Breer story about when Cam Ward won over Brian Callahan. And, he's so confident. And, he works so hard. And, and it reminds me of Levis last year. Now, I think Ward's a better player than Levis. I don't think they're going to be the same. But it's hard for me, again, to listen to all the same people that hyped up Will Levis last year to see that when Will Levis got out there on the football field, he certainly couldn't handle the situation, to be saying the same things about Cam Ward and for me to take it seriously. Do you have a similar issue with that?
I do, because when you look at Will Levis last year, they talked like he was Aaron Rodgers in his prime. They talked like he was the next great thing in the NFL. And it's one thing to say positive things about him. You want to do that. You want to do what you can to give affirmation to the work that he's doing and the improvements that he's making. But just by buttering him up, we used to call it, we're up in Mexico, we would call it a cocoa wash, where you use coconut shampoo and you wash somebody's head and that just makes his head expand. Well, you can't do that in the NFL. It just doesn't work, in part because the teammate knows. But if you're out there just buttering the guy up, that's not going to build confidence. His performance will build confidence. And when Will Levis went out there right from the opener and started to make just enormously horrific decisions that led to turnovers, that led to them losing the game. The first two games were like that, against the Bears and the Jets. All that talk just came back to bite them. And so, it kind of reminded me of what college coaches will do with quarterbacks in the spring game sometimes. I mean, there are certain college quarterbacks that will call a spring game and make sure that the defensive coordinator knows what the plan is, so that their quarterback throws for 450 yards and 7 touchdowns. And wow, is this guy great? Well, that's because of the simplicity of the coverages, and because they schemed it so that he could get that, so that all off season, everybody would talk about how great the quarterback is, because that'll build his confidence. Well, if that builds your confidence and that's what you are relying on, then you are guaranteeing failure in that endeavor. And so you can make the quarterback seem like he's better than he is. That won't help him become better than he's been. Only activity will help him become better than he's been, and the results of the activity will lead to legitimate confidence.
Trevor Maddich with us on the program, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. So Brian Callahan got to the podium today. As of last week, they had OTAs, and according to Paul Kaharski, one guy was absent, Simmons. Again, it's voluntary. Today, Callahan went to the podium. His opening statement was Curtis Joseph, who's a reserve linebacker, probably outside shot of making the team. He is going to miss today's OTAs with he's sick. Everybody else who's been here is here, which I thought, Trevor, was a shot at Simmons. I ask you this: if you're Brian Callahan and you're trying to use this offseason program for accountability and leadership development and all the things that he said a couple weeks ago were really important to him, how disappointed are you that Simmons isn't there, and is it a big deal?
Well, based on what you just said, Jared, I'm quite disappointed that he's not there, especially given all the different mini teams within the team and the competition and all the things that they're doing to try to develop leadership and teamwork and togetherness on this team. Now, Jeffrey Simmons, there's two things to look at this. The first one is, of course, Callahan has to be careful to not criticize him too much, because if he misses voluntary events, he's not required to be there. And if the coach gets up there and rips him up, then he has trouble with the NFLPA, because this is the way the contracts are written. And they're written that way so that, you can't have voluntary programs all throughout the entire off season, but they're kind of voluntary / mandatory. And if you're not there, you're in trouble and you're in the doghouse. And, well, wait a minute, these guys work hard during the season, during the off season, and they deserve some time to be on their own, whether they're working out or going to college. And so you can't really compel it. But that's one side. So, I can see that. But right now, they've got a new era dawning. That new era came with the drafting of Cam Ward with the #1 pick in the draft, and a new coaching staff that now has some new members there, especially special teams coach, and they're getting things together. And I would tend to think that while not mandatory, Jeffrey Simmons would want to be there, because you know what? It's good for him if the team wins. He makes more money and has a longer career if he's on a team that wins. And so personally, it helps him. And he's not there. And he doesn't have to be there. Okay, I get that. But what that tells me is that he's not a guy you can count on as a leader. And I've heard you talk about this, Jared, about how he's not really a leader. And if he were a leader, in my opinion, he'd be there right now, especially to set an example for the young players as to what you have to do and the commitments you have to make to be successful in the NFL. And, so not a leader. But then that brings us to another point. Why does Jeffrey Simmons have to be a leader anyway? Mm-hmm. I mean, why does he have to be a disruptive defensive lineman and be a leader? Why is that necessary? I mean, they've got other guys on that defense that should be outstanding leaders. There have been quarterbacks that I've seen, franchise quarterbacks, Pro Bowl quarterbacks over the decades that aren't leaders. They don't talk much. They're just kind of doing their own thing in the corner. And the coaches are always trying to get them to be more vocal, get them to be a leader, get them to say more. Well, if you're not a natural leader in an NFL locker room, then if you just tell them that you're going to be the leader now and start bossing people around, it's going to be worse than if you just act like you normally act and let somebody else be the leader. And so Jeffrey Simmons, in my opinion, I agree with you. He's shown that he is not a leader of a team sport. He's just not. But I have to think that he doesn't really have to be. There's other guys who could be a leader, and as long as he shows up and does his job, then, he doesn't have to be that too if he naturally isn't that guy.
Trevor Maddich with us on the program. Last one on the Titans for you, Trevor. Kevin Zeitler didn't practice today. He didn't practice last week. He's 35 years old. Brian Callahan says he's played enough football. He'll be okay. We're managing his workload. The only issue I have with that is the left tackle for the Titans has never played next to the right guard. The center is injured. The right guard has never played with the center. And the right tackle has never played with the right guard. I understand they're not wearing pads, but from a communication standpoint, would it not be advantageous to have Zeitler out there? What do you make of it?
Yeah, when I first heard that, Jared, I thought that maybe there's some health issue that they're working on that they don't want to reveal right now, because they're not in full pads. They're not in full contact. They want to lighten his workload, but what is the workload right now? I mean, the offensive line does a lot of really taxing physical drills, with big, heavy sandbags and with all kinds of things. He doesn't have to do any of those things if he doesn't want to overload anything. But then when you get into team period, where you're going through walkthroughs and jog throughs and things like that, you're right. The choreography between offensive linemen is one of the most important things in football. I mean, the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, I think they started the same 5 guys all season. Somebody can correct me on that on Twitter. But typically the most talented offensive line is not the best offensive line. It's the one that stays together, stays healthy, and works together a lot. So I've got to wonder, because Zeitler, you can't make a case that Zeitler is not a team guy. You just can't make that case. So I've got to wonder if there isn't something else going on, because, with the new guys on the offensive line, and especially with a new right tackle now who used to be the left tackle, you would think the veteran right guard, it would be perfect for him to be there and talking to J.C. Latham and working through some of the things they'll need to be doing when things go live in September.
Trevor Maddich, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. There is an SEC coach who I've determined is not the guy, and I've done it within the last hour. We'll get to that next with Trevor. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 The Game. Stillman and Company, June is usually not the time for trash talk in college football, but apparently Alabama wide receiver Ryan Williams did an interview with John Gruden. I'm not exactly sure why he did an interview with John Gruden. I'm wondering if that was to promote the fact that he's going to be on the cover of the new EA Sports college football video game. And apparently this has been transcribed by CBS Sports. When talking about Alabama's loss last year against Vanderbilt, which snapped the Crimson Tide's 23-game winning streak in the series and the program's first victory in 61 tries against top 5 competition all time, Ryan Williams said, quote, "They played a better football game than us that game. We came out slow. They capitalized. They held the ball. They had their game plan, and they executed. Apparently, though, he said going into this game, this upcoming season, we don't call them revenge games. We're going to kill an ant with a sledgehammer this year. Now, look, I fully expect Alabama to beat Vanderbilt. We had Clark Lee on the show on Friday. You know that I would love to see Vanderbilt win that game, but I expect Alabama to win. But the thing I take away from this, Trevor Matich with us presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, where experience matters, is that if Nick Saban was the head coach, Ryan Williams would not be saying such things. Trevor, to me, this is a sign that Kalen DeBoer might not be the guy, and I think is not the guy for Alabama if Ryan Williams is going to say things like this.
You know, I see that differently just because nobody said much of anything under Nick Saban. It was more like the Bill Belichick Patriot way, where you just throw perfume at your opponent and that's it. So anything other than that will seem like a relative shock to the system for Alabama fans. But when it comes down to Kalen DeBoer, I don't have worries about Kalen DeBoer at Alabama. I think he's going to be just fine. I think there were differences in style that the players last year didn't respond to very well. And those differences, I think, hurt them. And I think the biggest difference was discipline. I mean, with Nick Saban and the way he structured his locker room leadership, discipline was never a problem. I mean, when guys started to get out of line, if they were late to class, if they made stupid penalties during a game, between Saban and his iron fist and then everybody else involved in the process, people knew about it. They were held accountable immediately, and it was all top-down discipline. Kalen DeBoer came in and began to treat them more like they can be trusted to discipline themselves. And some of the guys could, and some of the guys couldn't. And that's why you saw some really stupid penalties from Alabama football last year in some of their losses. I mean, when Alabama lost to Tennessee, if I remember correctly, they were trailing in the final minute, and they had like a 3rd and 7 or something, and Alabama threw an incomplete pass to over to the right, and the defensive back started yelling at the Alabama receiver, who was already walking back towards the huddle. And whatever the Tennessee defensive back said to the Alabama receiver turned around and went up and punched the Tennessee guy in the face.
Mm-hmm.
So now they're, instead of 4th
cost of the game,
which is tough, it's now 4th and 20, whatever it was. And so, you know, that kind of lack of discipline was ridiculous. I mean, at the very end of the Vanderbilt game, one of the Alabama team captains lost his cool and drew a personal foul penalty that was just completely unnecessary, and things that you never saw under Nick Saban. So I kind of tend to think that guys didn't respond well enough to the new way that Kalen DeBoer was going to impose on the team, which relied on them to contribute to their own discipline because the iron hand, the iron fist of Nick Saban was no longer there. Kalen DeBoer has won at every level he's been at. He's won at high levels. You know, he's been a master developer of quarterbacks, although Jalen Milroe last year, I think, took a step back, but he was still drafted, for goodness sake. But I think Kalen DeBoer is going to be fine. The recruiting has kept up. They're one of the best recruiting classes in the country. And I think that once they get used to the DeBoer way rather than the Saban way, I think that Alabama will continue to be in competition for SEC championships for the foreseeable future.
Trevor, what do you make of the fact that the SEC has more money in all these sports and spends more and has more fan support and everything else, but especially baseball, where, I mean, they pay these baseball coaches way more money than these baseball coaches bring in. And now they're paying the players in baseball. And yet they had a terrible weekend. Texas gets beat by Texas San Antonio. And I saw on Twitter, I don't know if this is true or not, but the difference in NIL money between the two teams, $9 million for Texas to $600,000 for Texas San Antonio. Vanderbilt gets beaten by Wright State, the number 1 overall seed in the tournament. Georgia, see ya. Florida, see ya, etc. The ACC, the conference where all the coaches complain about not having the resources to compete, the ACC has 5 teams in the Super Regional. The SEC has 4. If the SEC has more money, and I'm wondering if this is truly a football thing too, which is well, we just build the SEC up in our heads, but it's really a lot closer. We've been told about the doomsday of the transfer portal and NIL and how it will take away from the have-nots, and yet here's San Antonio and, Wright State and Murray State still playing, and Murray State beat Ole Miss. Trevor, is the idea of the boogeyman of NIL and the transfer portal ruining Cinderella? Is that really kind of a red herring, and has baseball proven that this year? What do you make of it?
I think in baseball and even basketball, it's more likely for the Cinderellas to still have a chance, because in basketball, if you've got two guys that can drain threes at will, two, one's not enough because they'll double them. But if you've got two, then you've got a chance to go a long ways as a Cinderella. In baseball, if you've got a couple of great arms and enough bats, then you can win games. You can beat bigger teams that make more money. And in football, it's not that way. In football, the weaknesses of your team are going to define how far you can go. And if your right tackle isn't any good, then you might have the best running back in the league. Let's call him maybe Derrick Henry, just to pick a random name out of and you're still not going to, make the playoffs and get places, which is what we saw happen to the Titans. So, I think in football, it's a different thing. In baseball and basketball, I think you can have fewer wins and in recruiting and transfers and still succeed at a high level. And so I think that's part of the fun of it. But in football, I think that the rich guys are going to get richer. And the only way for any Cinderella to really compete as time goes on with the money that the Big Ten and the SEC are making going forward is if there's some big benefactor, some billionaire that went to pick a team, went to North Texas State. And he says, the Mean Green are going to be a top 10 football team, and I'm going to buy it every year. Absent that kind of benefactor, because of the difference in how much money the conferences make, in football, I think we're not going to see the Cinderellas. We'll see less and less of the Cinderellas going forward.
Trevor Maddich is presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trevor, great stuff as always. We'll talk next week.
Thanks, Jared.
Yep, Trevor on the program. Coming up next, I think you kind of disagree with what Trevor said right there. Again, we've been told for years now, Nick Saban's on a crusade against NIL and the transfer portal, and it's gonna ruin college sports. Certainly hasn't ruined the baseball tournament. We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106 for the game. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. We are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. Congratulations to the Tennessee Volunteers making the Super Regional for the 5th straight year. And let me say this, the SEC needed it last night because they played a bunch of Game 7s and a couple of them did not go their way. And it would have been a bad look if Tennessee had lost to Wake Forest and the ACC had gotten another team into the Super Regionals and the SEC had had another team bounced. But the truth is, we now have the final 16 in baseball, and this unbelievable, unstoppable conference no longer has the number 1 seed. They no longer have the number 2 seed. In fact, they've only got 4 teams of the 16. The ACC has 5 of the 16. 3 ACC hosts, 3 SEC hosts. I mean, even Oregon State is hosting. And I don't even know what conference they're in. And again, I don't think most of us care when it comes to college baseball, who's hosting and who's still alive. Like, if your team is not alive, you probably don't care anymore. Maybe I care a little bit more because my team is alive. I don't know. But that's not the real story I want to discuss. What I want to discuss is the boogeyman that the coaches and the administrators and all of these people involved with college athletics have been trying to sell us on for years. That, oh, the NIL and the transfer portal, they're going to ruin college sports. Nick Saban did a media tour in which he talked about how these rules in college sports are going to ruin parity, which is funny because when he was the coach at Alabama, there was no parity. He was the oligarch, and I think he was okay with that. Dabo Swinney hates NIL. Remember when he said, we're going to build our program in the God's name, image, and likeness? Yeah, how's that working out for Clemson? Yeah, they made the playoff. Good for them, but they're not a power anymore. Ohio State, they're the ones that have been able to run with NIL and have had a little bit of success, but that also means that they hadn't won the national title until last year for a couple seasons, and people were starting to get kind of frustrated with Ryan Day. Buy the best team money can buy and still can't beat Michigan. So for years and years, we had what was, in my opinion, essentially communism in college sports. All of the best schools had the most money, and they didn't want to share it with anybody else. Why? Because they didn't want other schools to be able to pay their coaches. So if we wanted the best coach, we just go get the best coach because we have the most money. We don't want to share that. They had the best players. Why did they have the best players? Well, because we have the most money, and not only do we have the most money, but we also have the best coaches, which have the best recruiters, and we can build the best facilities, and so we want those players. And I'm sure they, under the table, shared some money with some of those players, but for the most part, we'll keep the money ourselves. Again, kind of feels like communism, right? And then the Supreme Court said 9-0. Yeah, you can't do that. You can't tell Johnny Manziel that he can't make money off of his autograph. You can't tell players that they can't market who they are as individuals because it is unconstitutional. Why? Because last time I checked, we're not a communist country. And I've actually done a lot of reading, and I've done a lot of watching documentaries about communism and about the Cold War and about the idea that, trust me, everything that was being said in America during the Cold War was to fear people of communists. We need to know who's a communist around here. And again, I'm not saying that I'm pro-communist because I'm not. I am very much pro-capitalist. I am not a socialist. I'm a capitalist. But at the same time, trust me, all the things you've heard about communism, bad, they're saying in the communist countries. They're saying capitalism, bad. And I think what I've realized is this boogeyman of NIL This idea of, oh, have mercy, God forbid we pay the players. That's really not that scary when in practice. This idea of you can't let players transfer, but we can let the coaches go from school to school. Yeah, that's all bull crap. I mean, the truth is, it's better for the sport that we have NIL because the players should be paid. It's better that we have the transfer portal because, again, if a coach can leave every year, why can't the players leave? The coaches don't like it. The schools don't like it, but that's okay. They shouldn't like it. They're going to have to pay more money. The coaches are going to have to work harder to retain players already on the roster. They're going to have to work harder to get other players on their roster. That's okay. But all I've been told about for years now, and this goes all the way back to when Texas A&M tried to buy a football team with Jimbo Fisher as the coach, and Nick Saban absolutely lost his mind about A&M buying a team. But all I have been told is, oh, no, this system of college sports, it's broken. It can't survive. There's no way. There's no how. I don't know, man. I thought the baseball this weekend, pretty entertaining. You know, I asked ChatGPT, I said, what do communist countries, what do those dictators say about capitalism? Because, again, I know how capitalism works. It's not a perfect system, but it basically means, hey, you earn your value. Communism is we're all the same. And so I said, what did communist dictators used to say? Well, they said that capitalism exploits workers, that the Marxist core belief is that the rich profit by exploiting the labor of the working class. You mean that's not happening with the oligarchs in Russia? Capitalism is unstable. Yeah, unlike the famine under communist regimes. How'd it work out in Cuba? And I think the saying they had under there was, under socialism, man is man's brother. Under capitalism, man is man's wolf. And isn't that what all these coaches and all these athletic directors and university presidents and conference commissioners, isn't this what they've tried to scare us about for the last 5 years? Again, instead of man being man's brother, man is man's wolf. You're going to say goodbye to the Cinderellas. It's all going to be about the haves and the have-nots, and the haves are going to win. And I'm sorry, hasn't Texas and Ohio State and Alabama, and haven't they been winning anyway? And so here we are in college baseball, and the conference that has by far the most money and the best natural resources when it comes to baseball specifically, the SEC, because they have the most money along with the Big Ten, but they have warm weather, which the Big Ten does not. Kind of a big deal when it comes to baseball. The SEC is actually kind of sucked in this NCAA baseball tournament. And again, I don't understand this. The SEC has the most money, so they pay the coaches the most. So they should have the best coaches. And I guess you would tell me that they do. And now that we're paying the players, they should have the best players. Now that the players can move, if a guy has a good freshman year at Scarbini State, he can go transfer into Vanderbilt and they can pay him. And nobody has more money than Texas and Texas A&M. So shouldn't they be playing right now? But is the money gap and the conference gap that the boogeymen scared us of, is that really happening on the scoreboard? Texas A&M was preseason ranked number 1 in the country. They didn't even make the tournament. Texas was the SEC regular season champion. They didn't make it out of the regional at the hands of UTSA. Vanderbilt was the SEC champion in the tournament and the number 1 seed. Lost to Wright State. The conference that is hanging on by a thread, which is the ACC, which has Florida State and Clemson consistently bitching about we can't compete with the SEC. If we don't get the resources, we can't compete. Has 5 teams in the Super Regional. The league, where it just means more, has 4. And I know football's different than baseball, and baseball's different than basketball. But again, you know who made the Final Four this year? Duke. I think Duke, they're in the ACC. How'd the SEC do in the college football playoff? Georgia, Texas, Tennessee. How'd they do? They can't get past Notre Dame's not even in a conference. Texas is going to overtime with Arizona State. So I'm sorry. I understand this is all about the money, and I understand that, again, if we take 3 teams from the ACC and we take 3 teams from the Big 12, I understand. And I don't like it. I don't like what we did to the Pac-12. I don't like what we did to the Pac-12, and I don't like why we did it to the Pac-12. But enough with the bull crap that paying the players is the problem. Enough with, again, just the disingenuous, not proven by reality takes that player movement via the transfer portal is going to ruin the sports that you and I love. Because quite frankly, it's just not true. And this baseball tournament is a great example of that. If it was all about the haves and the have-nots, Coastal Carolina and UTSA would not be playing this weekend. And it's not just the SEC that's responsible for this. It's the ACC. Those coaches say, we can't compete. We don't have a pitching lab in our facility. Yeah, well, Vanderbilt does, and they're at home. So spare me with your red herrings, your straw man argument, your, again, playing on emotions that young people shouldn't be making money. Young people shouldn't be able to make choices, and playing on that emotion to the fans because you should know better. And the baseball tournament's proof of that. I don't want to hear any more about NIL and the transfer portal and how they're ruining the game, because they're not. You trying to set up automatic qualifiers because you think your conference is better on paper, that ruins the game. Enough with the SEC and the have and the have-nots. Didn't seem to stop Texas San Antonio. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company, 1025, 106 the game.
tonight. And Tony, what was the vision for Liam tonight? Was it a guarantee he would pitch? Was it a situation? And what was your thought going into it?
Just knew I was very prepared for the moment. You know, I feel like I've gone through the ringer now in the SEC, being there for 2 years, took in a lot of information last year, my first year, had some up and downs, and knew after all the buildup after this year, I'd be ready for what was my task. And, you know, arm felt good enough yesterday, arm felt great today, and just going out there and giving my team a chance to win. And really, like Coach Gad had the trust in me to go out there and close the game for us tonight.
There you go. That was Liam Doyle, and he is probably going to be the number 1 or number 2 pick in the MLB draft. And let me just say this. If you're one of these people like Nick Saban and you hate the NIL and the transfer portal, and every time it comes up, you talk about it like it is some boogeyman, then you should dislike Liam Doyle. If you're a Tennessee fan and you're one of these people that says college sports is broken, it's awful, the transfer portal, it's ruining everything, well, then you should dislike Liam Doyle. Because Liam Doyle got his career started at Coastal Carolina, where in 7 starts, he was 3-1 as a starter. Then he transferred to Ole Miss, where last year he made 11 starts. And then he transferred this year at 21 years old to Tennessee, where he just happens to be one of the best pitchers in the country at 10-3. No, I think you like NIL in the transfer portal because that's why Liam Doyle is on your team. And again, I have to bring this up because it drives me crazy every time we talk about the state of college athletics right now. College athletics is in perpetual flux, and that is because there's always tinkering changes with the college football playoff and the amount of money that these schools will be able to make, and there's always tinkering, or there's always a desire to leave or add schools from certain conferences while leaving others behind. Right now, Oregon State and Washington State are trying to figure out where they're going to end up one day. And that's really unfortunate. And I hate that for them. And I hate it for some of these rivalries that have gone away because I guess we just had to have USC in the Big Ten. But again, those are decisions that don't really affect the game. They don't affect the competition. And so what they do, and I'm talking about they, the administrators, sometimes some of the conference commissioners, the coaches, in the case of Nick Saban, the former coaches, people on television, is they play at your emotions with these individual athletes. And they tell you, we shouldn't be paying these young people. Why not? Are you flipping on the TV to go watch the defensive line coach nobody? No, you're flipping on the TV to watch the players. These players shouldn't be able to move around. It'll ruin the game. Again, I don't have a problem with the way things are going in baseball right now. I don't have a problem with football. I don't have a problem with basketball. What I have a problem with is I have a problem with them trying to expand the field of basketball to 180 teams. What I have a problem with is this idea that the Big Ten thinks they're entitled to 4 spots in the college football playoff because, well, Fox pays us a lot of money. Go ahead, give us 4 spots. That's what I have a problem with. And I also have a problem with some of these coaches and schools in the ACC because the ACC has 5 teams. Again, in the super regionals, the SEC has 4. And nobody, including the ACC, is trying to argue that they make more money or can pay more money than the SEC. But what some ACC coaches and some ACC administrators have done is they've decided to tell everybody that they can't compete. So they've decided to get out in front of everybody and say, we do not have the resources to compete. Well, you're competing right now. Duke was in the Final Four. You got 2 teams into the college football playoff. You've got 5 teams in the super regional. I'm sorry, but you're telling me your conference has fallen apart. And what that does is it devalues your own real estate. If you tell people, I can't live in this neighborhood because it's a bad neighborhood, there's bad crime, the schools are no good, no one's going to buy your house. But the ACC isn't a bad neighborhood. It's a good neighborhood. It's a good league. It's a good football league. It's a good basketball league, although this year it didn't live up to its standards. And it's a great baseball league. But don't let that get in the way of a good story, which is the one people are trying to sell you right now, which is that capitalism in college sports is bad. That's what they're doing. They're trying to tell you that these young guys, they don't deserve the money, even though they're the ones earning it. And a lot of people go along with it because this is what they've always been taught since they were little children. But that doesn't make it right. And I said this years and years and years ago. I said, I do not have a problem with paying players at all. As long as when I go and flip on the TV at 3:30 on a Saturday, I still get the college game of the week. I do not care. Just like I don't care if these guys go to class or not. And you don't care about that either. So just don't ruin Saturdays in the fall for me. Don't ruin the basketball tournament. And give me an interesting baseball tournament. That's all I ask. And what's happened over the last couple of years is actually crazy. Not only have we had great football over the last couple of years and a lot of parity between the leagues and the teams and things of that magnitude. The SEC hasn't won a national title for the last couple of years. That's different. College basketball and the NCAA tournament still gets a huge number. It's still great March Madness. The women's tournament is drawing unlike it ever has before. And again, I went to the baseball this weekend. It was a lot of fun. Stop listening to these people that are trying to sell you gobbledygook. That's just not true. And it makes me mad because if there's anything I hope you understand about me, it is this. I do not have to sit down and be beholden to selling a narrative. My bosses have not employed me to do that. And nobody has said, now, Jared, you know, this is what we want you to say. I hope the audience understands, like, I take a lot of pride in being a straight shooter. I really do. The one thing that drives me crazy is people who are intellectually dishonest and trying to take advantage of others. If you're just some crazy kookock and you don't know better and you think something crazy, I may say, that's a really stupid opinion. And I might laugh at you, but I'm not going to think less of you as a person. If I feel like you're trying to lie to people to take advantage of them, it really bothers me. And if I think you're lying to me to try to take advantage of me, now I'm offended. When it comes to these people that are saying that paying the players is bad or that allowing players to transfer is going to ruin the sports you love, trying to tug on the heartstrings that you have of watching your team on Saturdays, they're taking advantage of you. They're lying to you. And I'm tired of it. And this baseball tournament proves, no, the competition, the thing that we still truly value, the thing that gets us to turn the TV on, the competition, that still exists in college sports. Those guys are still trying to win. Those guys can still pull upsets. Cinderella still exists, even if we're paying the players and allowing them to transfer. Somebody that works at the station, Parker Kelly, sent me a tweet and said, so you're okay with how things are going in college sports right now? And I said, for NIL and the transfer portal, yeah, I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it. The killing of conferences and traditions like the Rose Bowl so that we can get a 16-team cash grab so the Big Ten can feel good about themselves, yeah, I have a problem with that. So don't let them lie to you. All right, that was a rant. Just driving me crazy. 615-737-1025. We'll hit your phones next. Stillman Company, 1025. Want to see the game?
Our guys' response to being down was equally insane, but probably the biggest thing I think were guys doing things they struggled throughout the year doing, well, 1 through 9. And then our guys that are just willing to take the ball. I'm telling you, it is a weird deal on this staff to have that many guys that want the ball no matter what day it is or what the circumstances are. Snead was willing to go 100 pitches today. I feel for the guys that didn't get action because everybody was available. Marcus Phillips, it would have had to be like, I don't know. And even Art was joking around about being out there. So I know it's in a unique way because, Frank is pretty hard on these guys and he gets results out of it. But there's a lot of trust and a lot of love there between the pitchers and Coach A. And, of course, there's other people that help out too. So maybe that's got something to do with it, that they want to pitch for the boys and not just themselves, which I greatly appreciate and benefited from today as well.
I mean, they got to pitch for the boys. And then Tony Vitello cracks open a Busch Light, shotguns it, and then crushes it on his forehead. And all the things David Reed hates about UT baseball, even though David Reed is a Tennessee season ticket holder. I can't get over that.
Football only.
I mean, you hate Tennessee baseball.
I don't hate Tennessee baseball. I hate their attitude. I hate the way they go
How
about
did you
their
feel when they
business.
won the national title last year? Did you watch the game? Did you go to the game? Did you go out with friends and watch the game? Were you wearing a Vol polo when you watched that game? What were you doing? Give me your national title experience last year.
I did not watch the game. I did not go anywhere. I did not wear any paraphernalia. I've never been to a Tennessee baseball game. I take that back. No, I take that back. Early 2000s, maybe late 90s, I went to a game over at Hawkins Field before it was Hawkins Field.
So you did not watch last year's national championship?
I did not. I did not. And I think I think the only thing that I said publicly to address it was to all those Vols fans in the past who tried to downplay Vanderbilt's baseball championship like it wasn't a championship in a real sport and it didn't matter and it was just Vandy and that's baseball, that's what they do, that they shouldn't be celebrating Tennessee's national championship.
Yeah, can't have that both ways. Can't say baseball doesn't matter and then say baseball's the best, which a lot of Tennessee fans did do. I am just absolutely speechless. And that's really hard for me when it comes to Reed's Tennessee fandom. Like, I'm just going to tell you right now, like, there's a little part of me, like, I'm 80% happy that Louisville won this regional this past weekend. The 20% that I'm unhappy with is they came out with the times for the super regionals. And so Vanderbilt would be playing on Friday at 2:00 if they had won the regional, because that's when Louisville plays. And if Vandy was playing Friday at 2:00, I would get a long weekend. So 80% of me is happy for my school. 20% of me is unhappy that I have to work on Friday like every other American out there. I could have had a day off. But I'm going to tell you right now, if they get to Omaha and they play, let's just, again, I don't think it'll happen, but this has been a crazy tournament. If Louisville gets to the final round, like the best 2 out of 3, the final series of the College World Series, I am going to Omaha. I'm not going to go for the first weekend. I'm going to go for that championship series, the 2 out of 3. And David Reed, you can host the show then because I will be watching baseball. Like that's because I love my team and I love my school.
It's a little different though, because I mean, that was the school that you graduated from. You went there. I didn't have a chance to go to I had a chance to go to UT Knoxville, but things didn't work out quite the best for me. But that's your school. I understand that. But
I'm not a season ticket holder.
Right, in football.
I'm not even a season ticket holder in football, Louisville football. And Louisville's closer than Knoxville.
Yeah, but it's also Louisville football. It's not Tennessee football. It's not Tennessee football. Okay.
I'm not saying that, but we're a decent football.
And I used to be a Tennessee basketball season ticket holder. And I only made it for maybe 5 or 6 games a year. But I love Rick Barnes because guess what? Rick Barnes does it the right way.
Look, I love you, but that is odd.
I've said this in the past, and I still stand by this. I wish I could divorce myself from about 90% of the Tennessee fan base. I don't want to be associated with about 90% of the Tennessee fans.
Good for you for standing up in what you believe in. And I will give you that. Phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. By the way, one person says you are not a VFL, David Reed, which you never claimed to be. You're just a Vol fan. You're not a Vol. You didn't go to UT. You didn't play for them. You didn't any of that.
I guess you guess what? They cash that check every single year.
One texter says, can we talk about how NIL was implemented so that guys could get paid for their autographs and t-shirts, and it immediately turned into a massive pay-for-play contracts? So Greg Sankey said the same thing to me, when he came on the show maybe a year ago. And he was like, if you remember when NIL got started, the whole point of NIL was not to buy football teams, but it was for players to be able to market themselves to companies. The way Caleb Williams, for instance, marketed himself to Wendy's and was running that campaign, or Dr. Pepper and was running that campaign. But again, there's really nothing you can do unless you can pay more than what's out there. So what I mean by that is nobody is going to Tom Brady and saying, Tom, we will give you $80 million to play for the Tennessee Titans, because the Tennessee Titans are the ones that are footing the bill for the Tennessee Titan players. But if I wanted to do that, I could, and there's really nothing they could do about it. And the NFL is collectively bargained. So they actually have some say over the players. I heard Donde Plowman and Danny White say, at the end of the day, we need a collective bargaining agreement. But if you do that, you have to share the profits of the TV money, and that's apparently the thing that they just don't want to do. So I have no problem with this. I knew the second that they said with NIL that, no, this was just for name, image, and likeness, and the school can't pay a player directly, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, I knew exactly what that meant. Anybody who remembers Rhett Bomar's career at Oklahoma knew exactly what that was going to mean. One text says, Vol baseball players are in the top 0.5% of insufferable a-holes worldwide. I find the Tennessee baseball team to have been tamed in comparison to what it was in 2022. I even think that Vitello has been tamed a little bit as compared to 2022. One texter says, Jared, you obviously did not play baseball, and you probably don't know really much about it when it comes to pitching and hitting, but any decent team with a shot in a short series can win, and that's why Wright State and ETSU competed so well. Yeah, so why wasn't Wright State playing well before this? Why wasn't in the pre-NIL era Wright State why wasn't there a Scarbini State making it to the finals? They, during the weekend at all the sites, and I saw this at the Vanderbilt site, but at all the sites, they had this, guess the year. And it was 2005. And it was, who was the winner of the College World Series? Oh, it was Texas. So why did Texas under Augie have such an advantage back in the day, but they don't now? And I know there were some schools that were, baseball schools that weren't good at anything else, like Cal State Fullerton. But for the most part, again, it was the good schools, the schools that wanted to pay. This idea that anyone can win in baseball, anyone can win one game in baseball, but it's pretty hard to get to Omaha and win when you don't have a deep squad. So don't give me this, hey, with anyone that's got good pitching, Wright State didn't have good pitching. A guy that no-hit Vanderbilt had a 5 ERA in the Horizon League. The guy that shut him down on Sunday, that guy had an 8 ERA. So give me a break. One texter says, while I agree with your NIL take, you're still a moron on most things. Thank you. At least we can agree. And that, I think, is kind of what I'm looking for, on some level or another. 615-737-1025. There is a transaction that has been made in the National Football League that I must bring to your attention. And so we'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
With that, go ahead.
Maybe going to be out there?
He's here. Again, we're just being smart, managing him at 35 years old and just getting here for this last half of the offseason program. So just take it slow with him. Don't need to see a lot of Zeitler at the moment. He's pretty proven at this point in his career. So more just about being smart than anything else. But he's here. He's participating. He's around. He's in meetings, and he's with us, part of the team.
Okay, that was Brian Callahan on Kevin Zeitler, who did not practice today but was there. And I don't necessarily love that, but I feel okay about Kevin Zeitler. I think he'll be fine. I do want to see him spend some time with J.C. Latham just because that is important. And it's very limited, the amount of reps. They have one more OTA, which is tomorrow. And then they have the mandatory mini camp next week. And then it's training camp. And after about a week and a half of training camp, it's joint practices with Atlanta and then joint practices with Tampa Bay, or actually I think it may be the other way around, Tampa Bay then Atlanta. But it's going to catch up on you, or it's going to run up on you quickly. The reason I bring that up is because there is a transaction in the National Football League with which I would like to read for you. The San Francisco 49ers made a trade on Friday that became official today, in which Bryce Huff went from the Eagles to San Francisco. With that, San Francisco's roster was one too many. They needed to make a move. You know, they traded a draft pick in order to get Bryce Huff. The San Francisco 49ers have waived Nicholas Petit-Frere, a.k.a. PT. Now, PT was signed on May 8th and did not even make it 1 month with the San Francisco 49ers. So I don't know what they asked him to do. Again, there wasn't one single padded practice for PT. And Andre Dillard is still out there. And I say this and I bring this up because this time last year, PT was injured and not able to practice. And I kept saying, the Titans don't have a right tackle. They do not have one. And you people kept telling me, Bill Callahan will fix it. I trust him more than I trust you. And I kept saying to you, Bill Callahan is not Jesus, who famously turned water to wine. He is a football coach. And quite frankly, he's not the general manager, and he's not good enough to be a head coach because he wasn't very good at that. No, Jared. And by week 3, the Titans had learned their lesson. So while I expect the offensive line to be better for the Titans this year, and Dan Moore is legitimately a starting player, even if he's not a legitimately good starting player, he is legitimately a starting player. I cannot get over the fact that this time last year, I had to tell you people that right tackle was an important position and that a lot of you people actually pushed back on the notion that right tackle was an important position in the National Football League. I mean, I'm serious. People are like, oh, no, it's not that big of a deal. Yes, it is that big of a deal. And I remember I put out a tweet saying at the beginning of the offseason last year, I said the options for right tackle are not Dylan Radins, Nicholas Petit-Frere, a.k.a. PT, or Jalen Duncan. And you guys kept saying, but I think PT, Bill Callahan. That single decision almost got Brian Callahan fired last year. Probably did get Rand Carthon fired, and it almost got Brian Callahan fired. And I just think it's hilarious. Again, I know that now everybody knows PT stinks, but I do think it's just hilarious that a year ago I tried to tell you people, and you didn't want to listen. Not even a month with the 49ers. PT needs to go back to gambling and fantasy football. That's it for us. Stillman and Company. We'll see everybody tomorrow at 2.